The spring of 1881 brought dust and desperation to Red Hollow in equal measure. The town squatted at the edge of the Arizona Territory like something ashamed of itself. 20 buildings, half of them empty, the other half filled with people who'd run out of places to run. Elena had been born here, back when her mother was still alive and her father still remembered what it meant to be a man. Now she stood in the kitchen of their falling-apart house, holding a wedding dress that smelled like mothballs and lies. "It's a good match," her father said from the doorway. John Whitmore had the hollowed-out look of someone who'd surrendered to life years ago. His hands trembled. They always did now, especially before noon when the whiskey hadn't caught up with the shakes yet. Crowley's the richest man in 3 counties. His last wife disappeared. Elena didn't turn around. Sarah Brennan. She was 19. That was never proven. Before her, it was Martha Henley. She lasted 6 months. John shifted his weight. The floorboards creaked under him like they were tired of holding him up. "You're talking about rumors. I'm talking about graves nobody can find." Elena finally looked at him. "Tell me you didn't know. Tell me you thought this was actually about marriage." Her father's face went red, then pale. "We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Crowley owns the bank. He owns half the territory. You think I wanted— How much?" The question stopped him cold. "How much did he pay you to sign me over?" John's mouth worked, but nothing came out for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. 300, and he cleared the debt. Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart. That had broken when her mother died 5 years ago. This was different. This was the last piece of hope she'd been carrying around. The stupid, childish belief that maybe her father loved her more than he loved forgetting his failures. "Get out," she said. "Elena? Get out of this house. Get out of my sight. Go find Crowley's money and drink yourself to death with it. You're good at that." John Whitmore left without another word. The door didn't even slam. It just clicked shut, quiet and final, like a coffin lid. Elena stood there holding the dress until her arms started shaking. Then she threw it on the floor and walked out the back door into the late afternoon heat. Red Hollow looked different now, uglier. Every building seemed to lean toward Crowley's estate at the north end of town, like the whole place was bowing to him. The saloon, the general store, the feed depot, all of them operated on his sufferance, paid rent into his pockets, smiled when he walked past. Even the sheriff wore Crowley's brand, a silver star bought and paid for, paid. Elena walked without direction, just moving because standing still meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and she couldn't afford to feel anything right now. She needed to be cold. She needed to be smart. She needed a way out that didn't exist. Her feet carried her to the eastern edge of town, where the smell of coal smoke and hot metal hung in the air. The blacksmith's forge sat in a ramshackle building that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and stubborn refusal to fall down. The double doors stood open, and inside someone was working. Elena had seen the blacksmith before. Everyone in Red Hollow had. Cole Mercer. Quiet man, maybe 30, with the kind of build that came from swinging a hammer 10 hours a day. He'd shown up 8 months ago, paid cash for the old forge, and kept to himself. Didn't drink at the saloon. Didn't attend church. Didn't seem to want anything from anybody. The sound of metal on metal rang out steady and hypnotic. Elena found herself walking toward it without deciding to. Inside the forge, heat hit her like a physical thing. Cole stood at the anvil, stripped to a sweat-stained shirt with the sleeves rolled up, bringing a hammer down on glowing steel with mechanical precision. His face was all concentration, like the horseshoe he was shaping was the only thing that existed in the world. He didn't look up when Elena entered, just kept working, each strike perfectly placed, the metal bending to his will one blow at a time. "I need," Elena started, then stopped because she didn't know what she needed. An escape route, a miracle. Someone to tell her this wasn't happening. Cole's hammer paused mid-swing. He looked at her for the first time, and she was struck by how alert his eyes were. Not friendly, not unfriendly, just aware. Like he was cataloging everything about her in a single glance and filing it away for later. "You're Whitmore's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. "Was," Elena said. "Now I'm Crowley's property, apparently." Something shifted in Cole's expression. Not quite sympathy. More like recognition. "Heard about that. Town's been talking. I bet they have. Elena felt a bitter laugh trying to escape. She choked it down. Everyone knows. Everyone's just fine with it. A girl gets sold to settle a debt, and nobody even blinks. Cole set down his hammer. He picked up the half-finished horseshoe with tongs and thrust it into a bucket of water. Steam hissed up between them. What do you want me to say? I don't know, nothing. I shouldn't have come here. Elena turned to leave. Your father's a coward. She stopped. Not evil, Cole continued, his voice flat and factual. Just weak. There's a difference. Evil men make choices. Weak men let choices get made for them and call it fate. Elena turned back slowly. You don't even know him. Don't have to. I know the type. Cole pulled the cooled horseshoe from the water and examined it. I know Crowley's type too. Man like that doesn't want a wife. He wants a possession, something he can put on a shelf and point to when company comes over. Something that proves he's so powerful he can buy whatever he wants, including people. You're not making me feel better. Wasn't trying to. Cole met her eyes again. You came here for a reason. What is it? Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. What was the reason? She'd been walking blind, running from her own thoughts, and somehow ended up here, in front of a stranger who saw through everything in about 30 seconds. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe I wanted to hear someone say it out loud, that this is wrong, that I'm not crazy for thinking I shouldn't have to do this. You're not crazy. Cole set the horseshoe aside and leaned against the workbench, studying her. But you're also not going to find help in Red Hollow. This town's got Crowley's boot on its neck. Nobody's going to stand up for you. What about you? The question came out before Elena could stop it. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, maybe. Or memory. I'm just a blacksmith, he said. No, you're not. The words hung in the hot air between them. Elena didn't know where they'd come from, but as soon as she said them, she knew they were true. Cole Mercer moved wrong for a blacksmith. He stood wrong. The way he'd looked at her when she walked in, that wasn't how a craftsman looked at a customer. That was how a hunter looked at terrain. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened up and walked to the forge doors, looking out at the street. Wedding Sunday? Yes. 3 days? Yes. He nodded slowly, like he was working through a problem in his head. Crowley's got 8 men on his payroll. 6 of them are gun hands, not ranch workers. He keeps them close. The other 2 are deputies, which means they've got legal cover for whatever they do. Elena's heart started beating faster. How do you know that? I pay attention. Cole turned back to her. I also know Crowley's been buying up land from people who can't pay their debts, not just mortgages. He's been forcing sales, manipulating prices, making sure nobody can compete with him. Your father's not the first person he's cornered, just the first one who had something he wanted besides land. You've been watching him. I've been watching everything. Cole walked back to his workbench and pulled out a rag, wiping his hands with slow, deliberate movements. This town's rotten from the inside out. I've seen it before. Places where one man gets too much power and everyone else just accepts it, until accepting it becomes participating in it. Why do you care? Elena asked. You said it yourself. You're just a blacksmith. This isn't your problem. Cole looked at her, and for the first time she saw something raw in his expression, something that hurt to look at. I had a brother once, a good man, better than me. He stood up to someone like Crowley back in Kansas, a man who thought his money made him God. My brother ended up dead in an alley with his throat cut, and the killer walked free because the sheriff was on the payroll. Elena's breath caught. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just understand something. Cole's voice got quieter, harder. I didn't do anything to help him. I was too young, too scared, too convinced that fighting back would just make things worse, so I did nothing, and I've been living with that for 6 years. The forge seemed smaller suddenly, hotter. Elena felt sweat running down her back, but she couldn't move, couldn't look away from Cole's eyes. I can't promise you safety, he said. I can't promise you success. But if you want to run, if you want to fight back, if you want to do anything besides walk into that church on Sunday and surrender what's left of your life, he paused. I'll help you. Elena felt tears stinging her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying was for later. Crying was for when this was over, one way or another. Why? Because someone should have helped my brother. Because this town needs to see that Crowley isn't invincible. Because... Cole stopped, then shook his head. Because I'm tired of doing nothing. They'll kill you, Elena said. You know that, right? If you help me run, if you stand against Crowley, he'll send his men after you, and they won't stop until you're dead. Probably. That doesn't scare you? Cole smiled, but there was no humor in it. I've been scared every day for 6 years. Scared of becoming the kind of man who watches injustice happen and tells himself it's not his problem. Compared to that, he shrugged. Dying sounds almost peaceful. Elena stared at this man, this stranger who'd somehow become the only person in Red Hollow willing to treat her like a human being instead of a transaction. She thought about Sunday, about the church, about Crowley's hands on her and his ring on her finger and the rest of her life spent as property. What do we do? She asked. Cole turned back to his workbench and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Elena. She opened it and felt her stomach drop. It was her marriage contract, the one her father had signed, the one that made her Crowley's legal possession. How did you... Crowley's men showed it around the saloon yesterday, making sure everyone knew. I bought rounds for the deputy until he was drunk enough to let me copy the details. Cole's expression was grim. Legal documents have power in this territory, even forged ones. Crowley's using this to make sure if you run, you're breaking the law. Not him, you. Elena's hands were shaking. She stared at the contract, at her father's signature, at the cold legal language that reduced her entire existence to terms and conditions. Then Cole reached out, took the paper from her hands, and tore it in half. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the forge. He tore it again and again until the contract was confetti in his calloused hands. Then he walked to the forge and threw the pieces into the coals. They caught fire immediately, burning bright and fast, turning to ash in seconds. That's a copy, Cole said. The real one's in Crowley's safe, but it's a start. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just stared at the burning paper, watching her enslavement turn to smoke. Tomorrow night, Cole said. Pack light, just what you can carry in a saddlebag. Meet me here 2 hours after sunset. By then, Crowley's men will be drinking at the saloon, and the sheriff will be making his rounds. We'll have maybe a 3-hour head start before anyone notices you're gone. Where will we go? North, into the mountains. There are old mining trails up there, places where horses can go but wagons can't follow. If we can reach the timberline, we'll have options. They'll come after us. Yes. They'll bring guns. Yes. People will probably die. Cole looked at her steadily. Yes. Elena felt something crystallizing inside her, something cold and clear and sharp. Fear was still there, but it was changing shape, becoming something else, something she could use. Tomorrow night, she said, 2 hours after sunset. Don't bring anything that matters, Cole warned. Assume we'll lose everything we start with. This isn't an adventure, it's survival. I understand. And Elena? Cole's voice stopped her as she turned to leave. If you change your mind, I won't judge you. Walking into that forge was the bravest thing you could do. Walking into that church would just be human. Nobody could blame you for it. Elena met his eyes. I'd blame me. She left before he could respond, stepping out of the heat and smoke into the cooling evening air. Red Hollow looked the same as it had an hour ago, but Elena felt different, lighter, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't know about until someone helped her set it down. The walk home took 5 minutes. It felt like 5 seconds. Her mind was already racing ahead, cataloging what she needed, what she could leave behind, how to pack a saddlebag without her father noticing. Assuming he was even sober enough to notice anything, the house was empty when she got back. John Whitmore was probably at the saloon, turning Crowley's blood money into the kind of oblivion he craved. Elena didn't care anymore. Let him drink. Let him forget. Let him wake up on Sunday morning and discover his daughter had vanished, and he'd have to explain that to Crowley. She went to her room and started making mental lists. One change of clothes, her mother's locket, the small knife her mother had given her, the one meant for cutting vegetables but sharp enough for other purposes if needed. Anything else was just weight. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Elena lay in bed listening to the sounds of Red Hollow settling into darkness, dogs barking, horses moving in corrals, the distant sound of piano music from the saloon. Normal sounds. The sounds of a town that thought tomorrow would be just like today. They were wrong. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena moved through her routines in a daze, washing dishes that didn't need washing, sweeping floors that didn't need sweeping, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling into panic. Her father appeared sometime around noon, hungover and quiet, and they moved around each other like ghosts. By late afternoon, Elena couldn't stand being in the house anymore. She walked into town, telling herself she was just getting fresh air, but really she was memorizing. The way the light hit the buildings, the smell of dust and horse manure and pine wood, the sound of Mr. Patterson's hammer on his cobbler's bench, all the small details of the only home she'd ever known. She was saying goodbye. The realization hit her as she stood in front of the general store, watching Mrs. Chen arrange vegetables in the window. After tonight, she'd never see this place again, never walk these streets, never hear these sounds. Red Hollow would become a memory, whether she survived or not. Miss Whitmore. Elena turned and felt ice water dump down her spine. Victor Crowley stood 5 feet away, hat in hand, smiling at her like they were old friends. He was a tall man, well-dressed in a way that seemed designed to remind everyone of his wealth. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his polished boots to the gold watch chain across his vest. He was probably 45, maybe 50, with graying temples and the kind of confidence that came from never hearing the word no. "Mr. Crowley," Elena managed. Her voice sounded steady. "Good. I wanted to check on you," Crowley said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who'd learned to hide sharp edges under velvet. "Wedding's day after tomorrow. Wanted to make sure you had everything you needed." "I'm fine, thank you." "Your father mentioned you were upset about the arrangement." Crowley's smile didn't waver. "I understand. It's a big change. But I assure you, Elena, may I call you Elena?" She didn't answer. He took it as permission. "I assure you you'll want for nothing as my wife. Fine dresses, a beautiful home, respect throughout the territory. There are women who would envy your position. Were your previous wives among them?" The question came out before Elena could stop it. Crowley's smile finally flickered, just for a second. Then it was back, harder now. "I see the town gossips have been busy. Sarah left of her own accord. Martha passed from fever. Both tragic situations, but hardly mysterious. Where did Sarah go?" "I have no idea. She didn't feel compelled to share her plans." Crowley stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but definitely intentional. "Elena, I'm going to be honest with you. I could have had any woman in 3 counties. I chose you because I believe you have strength, intelligence, fire. Those are qualities I admire. You chose me because my father owed you money. That's how the opportunity arose, yes. But the decision was mine, and it was based on you, not him." Crowley's eyes held hers. "I know this seems frightening now, but give it time. Give us time. I think you'll find I'm not the monster people whisper about." Elena forced herself to hold his gaze, to not look away, to not show the revulsion crawling up her throat. "Is there anything else, Mr. Crowley?" His smile went cold. "Just a reminder. This is a legal contract filed with the territorial court. Breaking it would have consequences. For you and anyone who helped you." There it was, the threat wrapped in silk. "I understand," Elena said. "Good." Crowley put his hat back on. "I'll see you Sunday. Wear the dress I sent. It cost more than your father made in a year." He walked away, and Elena stood there trying not to shake, trying not to run, trying not to scream. The sun was setting when she finally made it back to the house. 2 hours. 2 hours until she met Cole at the forge. 2 hours until she either became a free woman or a fugitive or a corpse. John Whitmore was in the kitchen, staring at a bottle of whiskey like it held the answers to questions he was afraid to ask. He looked up when Elena entered. "You've been out," he said. "Yes." "Where?" "Town." They stared at each other across the kitchen table, father and daughter, strangers. "I saw Crowley talking to you," John said quietly. "Through the window of the saloon." Elena didn't respond. I know you hate me. His voice cracked. I know I've failed you, failed your mother, failed everything that mattered. But Elena, I'm your father. Whatever happens, whatever you think of me, I'm still your father. Are you? Elena heard herself ask. Because fathers protect their daughters. Fathers fight for them. You sold me. I had no choice. Everyone has a choice. You just picked the one that let you keep drinking. John's face crumpled. For a moment, Elena thought he might cry. Instead, he poured whiskey into a glass with shaking hands and drank it in one swallow. Do what you have to do, he whispered. I won't stop you. Elena stared at him. What? You think I don't know? John looked up at her and his eyes were red but clear. You think I don't see it? The way you've been packing, the way you've been looking at everything like you're memorizing it. You're leaving. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, please. I've lied enough for both of us. John pushed the bottle away. I know I don't deserve to ask anything from you, but I need you to understand something. When your mother died, something broke in me, something I can't fix. And instead of being strong for you, instead of being what you needed, I just gave up. I know. I sold you to Crowley because I was too weak to face what he'd do if I refused, too afraid of losing the house, the land, everything. I told myself I was protecting you, giving you security, but I was just protecting myself. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. And I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's all I have. Elena felt something tight and hot building in her chest. Not forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that. Maybe she'd never be ready. But something softer than hate. I need to go, she said. I know. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He set it on the table and pushed it toward her. $80. It's all I have left. Take it. That's Crowley's money. It's yours now. Take it and run fast. Elena picked up the pouch, feeling the weight of it. Blood money, shame money. But money was money, and she'd need every advantage she could get. Thank you. Elena? Her father's voice stopped her at the door. The blacksmith, Mercer. He's helping you. She didn't answer. He's a good man, John said. Better than the rest of us. He came to me last week, asked questions about Crowley, about the contract. I thought he was just curious, but he was planning this, wasn't he? Elena's throat was tight. Goodbye, Papa. Be safe. And Elena, don't come back. Whatever happens, don't come back to Red Hollow. There's nothing for you here. She left before the tears could start, walked out of that house for the last time, carrying a saddlebag and $80 and the last words her father would ever speak to her. The forge was dark when she arrived, but Cole was there, leading 2 horses out of a makeshift stable behind the building. Good horses, strong, built for distance, not speed. You came, he said. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would, but hoping and knowing are different things. Cole handed her the reins of a gray mare. Can you ride? Well enough. Good. We've got 20 miles to cover before sunrise, and the terrain's going to get rough. He swung up onto his own horse, a big black gelding that looked like it could run through walls. Once we leave town, we don't stop except to rest the horses. If someone spots us, we run. If they corner us, I know, Elena said. She mounted the mare, feeling the familiar grip of leather and the solid weight of the horse beneath her. I'm ready. Cole looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Let's go. They rode out of Red Hollow at a walk, quiet and careful. Just 2 people heading out for an evening ride. Nobody stopped them. Nobody even looked twice. The town was settling into its usual rhythms. Drinks flowing at the saloon, families finishing dinner, kids being called in from playing in the street. Normal. Peaceful. A lie. They reached the edge of town and Cole kicked his horse into a trot, then a canter, then a full gallop. Elena followed, leaning low over her mare's neck, feeling the wind tear at her hair and her heart pound in her chest. Behind them, Red Hollow disappeared into the darkness. Ahead, the mountains rose like a promise, or a threat, or both. And somewhere between the town and the wilderness, Elena Whitmore stopped being someone's daughter, or someone's property, or someone's anything. She was just herself. And for the first time in her life, that was enough. Ungut. They rode through the night like ghosts, following trails that barely existed, Cole navigating by moonlight and instinct. The land rose steadily, badlands giving way to scrub pine and red rock formations that looked like God had gotten angry and thrown mountains at the sky. Elena's body screamed at her after the first hour. Her thighs burned, her back ached, her hands cramped around the reins, but she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop, just kept riding, matching Cole's pace, refusing to be the weak link. Somewhere around midnight, Cole finally pulled his horse to a stop near a creek bed. "We rest here, 20 minutes. Water the horses, stretch your legs." Elena dismounted and immediately regretted it. Her legs nearly buckled. She caught herself on the saddle and stood there for a moment, breathing hard, waiting for her body to remember how to work. "You're doing good," Cole said. He was already loosening his horse's saddle, checking its hooves. Most people would have asked to stop an hour ago. Most people aren't being chased by Victor Crowley's men. Fair point. Cole pulled a canteen from his saddle and tossed it to her. "Drink. Not too much. We've got a long night ahead." The water was warm and tasted like metal, but Elena drank it like it was the finest wine. When she finished, she splashed some on her face and neck, feeling the cool liquid cut through the dust and sweat. "How far have we come?" she asked. "Maybe 15 miles. We're making good time, but they'll be after us by now. Crowley probably sent men to your house around sunset. When they found you gone," Cole checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded. "We've got maybe 3-4 hours before they pick up our trail. Can we stay ahead of them? Depends. These men know the territory as well as I do, maybe better. But they'll be moving in a group, and groups move slower than pairs." He looked at her seriously. "We're not going to outrun them forever, Elena. At some point, there's going to be a confrontation." "I know." "Can you shoot?" Elena hesitated. "I fired a rifle. Hunting. Nothing big. Rabbits, mostly." Cole pulled a revolver from his belt and held it out to her. "Keep this. It's loaded. 6 shots. If anyone gets close to you, aim for the chest and pull the trigger. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just shoot." The gun was heavier than Elena expected. Colder. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not protection, not safety. Just the potential for violence and the promise that she'd have to use it. "I don't know if I can kill someone," she said quietly. "You won't know until you have to." Cole's voice was matter of fact. "But I'd rather you have it and not need it than need it and not have it." Elena tucked the revolver into her belt. It felt wrong there. Foreign. Like wearing someone else's skin. They mounted up again and kept riding, climbing higher into the mountains, following switchbacks and narrow trails that sometimes seemed to disappear entirely. The moon was high and bright, turning the landscape into something from a fever dream, all sharp angles and deep shadows and rock formations that looked like frozen waterfalls. Dawn was just starting to gray the eastern sky when Cole finally pulled to a stop on a ridge overlooking the valley they'd left behind. He pulled out a small spyglass and scanned the horizon. Elena watched his face change. "What is it?" she asked. "Riders, 6 of them, maybe 7 miles back." He handed her the spyglass. "Look at the base of that red rock formation. See them?" Elena looked. It took her a moment to spot them, tiny figures on horseback, moving in a line, following their trail with grim determination. "They're not stopping," she said. "No, they're not." Cole took the spyglass back. "Crowley must have offered a hell of a bounty. These men are riding like their lives depend on catching us." "Maybe they do. If they come back without me, Crowley will make examples of them." "Probably." Cole studied the trail ahead. "We need to make a choice. We can keep running, try to stay ahead of them, hope we reach help before they reach us. Or we can find a defensible position and make them come to us on our terms." "What do you think we should do?" Cole looked at her. "I think you should decide. This is your life we're gambling with." Elena stared at the distant riders, thinking about what they represented. Crowley's power. Crowley's reach. Crowley's absolute certainty that he could buy, control, and recover anything he wanted, including people. "I'm tired of running," she said. "Let's make them come to us." Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval? Maybe. Or respect. "There's a canyon about 2 miles north. Narrow entrance, high walls. If we set up there, they'll have to come at us single file. It'll even the odds." "And if they don't follow us in?" They will. Men like that. They've been chasing us all night. They're angry, frustrated. They'll want to finish this and they'll want to do it fast. That makes them sloppy. They rode hard for the canyon, racing the sunrise. By the time they reached it, the sky was pink and gold, morning light spilling across the mountains like honey. The canyon was exactly what Cole had described, a narrow crack in the rock face, maybe 20 feet wide at the entrance, with walls that rose straight up for 100 feet on either side. Cole dismounted and started grabbing supplies from his saddlebag. We'll set up here. Put the horses deeper in the canyon behind that rock outcropping. If things go bad, you run for them and ride north. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just ride until you hit the next town and find the territorial marshal. I'm not leaving you. Elena, no. She slid off her horse and tied the reins to a scrub pine. You didn't abandon me. I'm not abandoning you. We fight together or we die together. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he handed her the rifle. You know how to use this? Point and shoot. That's the basic idea. He checked his own rifle, then his revolver, then 2 more pistols Elena hadn't known he was carrying. We're outnumbered, probably outgunned. The only advantage we have is position, so we make them pay for every foot of ground. They set up behind natural rock barriers on either side of the canyon entrance, creating a crossfire. Cole showed Elena how to sight down the rifle, how to compensate for distance and wind, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. Don't aim for kills, he said. Aim to slow them down. A wounded man stops a fight as effectively as a dead one, and wounded men make other men cautious. You've done this before. It wasn't a question. Cole didn't answer, but the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't his first ambush, wasn't his first fight. Whatever Cole Mercer had been before he came to Red Hollow, Blacksmith wasn't the whole truth. They waited. The sun climbed higher, baking the canyon in dry heat. Elena's hands were sweating on the rifle. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears, louder than the wind, louder than the distant sound of hoofbeats getting closer. They're coming, Cole said quietly. Remember, slow, steady breaths. Don't shoot until I do. And Elena? Yes? Thank you. For what? For giving me a reason to be better than I was. Before Elena could respond, the riders appeared at the canyon entrance. 7 men, all armed, all hard-faced and angry and ready to kill. At the front was Crowley's lead enforcer, a man named Pike. Tall, scarred, with the kind of eyes that enjoyed other people's pain. He pulled his horse to a stop at the canyon mouth and studied the narrow passage ahead. Mercer, he shouted, we know you're in there. Send out the girl and we'll let you ride away. Cole didn't answer. She's contracted property, Pike continued. Legal ownership. You're committing a crime. Bringing her back alive means a pardon for both of you. Making us come get her means lead and rope. Still silence. Pike spat in the dust. Your choice, Blacksmith. Your funeral. He kicked his horse forward. The other riders followed. Cole let them get 20 feet into the canyon. Then he fired. The shot cracked like thunder in the confined space. Pike's horse screamed and reared, throwing him. The riders behind scattered, drawing weapons, shouting. Now! Cole yelled. Elena pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked harder than she expected, slamming into her shoulder, making her ears ring. She didn't know if she hit anything, couldn't see through the sudden smoke. Just levered another round and fired again. Chaos erupted in the canyon. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Gunfire echoed off the walls until it sounded like 100 people shooting instead of 9. Elena saw Pike scrambling for cover behind a boulder, saw one rider trying to turn his horse around in the narrow space, saw another man fall from his saddle, clutching his leg. Cole was firing with mechanical precision, each shot deliberate, each one forcing the attackers to take cover or retreat. He wasn't trying to kill them. He was controlling the space, making the canyon a killing field that nobody wanted to be in. Reload, he shouted at Elena. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the rifle, trying to remember the steps. Empty the chamber, insert new rounds, lock it, raise it, fire. A bullet smashed into the rock above her head, showering her with stone chips. Elena ducked, her breath coming in gasps, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and terror. This was real. This was happening. Men were trying to kill her. She popped up and fired blindly, just trying to keep the attackers back. The rifle's kick knocked her off balance. She fell hard on her side, scraping her hands on rough stone. Elena, Cole's voice cut through the noise. You hit? No, I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She was terrified. But fine was relative. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. Pike's voice rang out from behind his boulder. You can't hold that position forever, Mercer. We'll starve you out, burn you out, whatever it takes. Then you better get started, Cole shouted back. Because I'm not moving. More silence. Elena risked a glance around her cover. The canyon entrance was littered with scared horses and scattered gear. 2 men were down, one wounded, one maybe dead. The others had pulled back to cover positions, but they weren't retreating. This is stupid, Pike yelled. The girl's nothing to you. Just a job. Just another piece of Crowley's property. Why die for her? Because she's not property. Cole's voice was hard and final. She's a person, and I'm done watching people get treated like things. Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Not fear, not relief, something bigger and more dangerous. Hope. Pike laughed, bitter and mean. Noble blacksmith, protecting the damsel. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a man in over his head. And when I drag you back to Crowley, he's going to make an example of you that this whole territory will remember. He'll have to catch me first. Another volley of gunfire erupted. Elena fired until the rifle was empty, then grabbed the revolver from her belt and kept shooting. The gun bucked in her hand. The noise was deafening. She couldn't think, couldn't plan, could only react and shoot and try not to die. Then she heard hoofbeats, not from the canyon entrance, from behind. Elena spun around and saw 3 riders coming from the north, moving fast, rifles drawn. For one horrible second, she thought it was more of Crowley's men, that they'd been outflanked, that this was over. Then she saw the stars on their chests, marshals, federal marshals. The lead rider pulled his horse to a stop near Elena's position and looked down at her with sharp, assessing eyes. He was older, maybe 50, with silver-shot hair and the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Miss Whitmore? He asked. Elena could only nod. I'm Marshal Wade Barrett. You can lower that pistol now. You're safe. At the canyon entrance, Pike and his men were mounting their horses, scrambling to escape. Barrett's marshals rode past, firing warning shots over their heads. Federal agents, Barrett shouted. Drop your weapons and dismount. This is your only warning. Pike made a run for it. One of Barrett's deputies put a round through his horse's legs. The animal went down screaming. Pike rolled clear, came up running, and made it maybe 10 steps before another deputy tackled him face first into the dirt. The fight went out of Crowley's men after that. They surrendered without further shooting, standing with hands raised while the marshals collected their weapons and tied their wrists. Barrett dismounted and walked over to where Elena sat slumped against the rock, still holding the revolver, still shaking. You hurt? I don't think so. You did good, both of you. Barrett looked over at Cole. You're Mercer, the blacksmith. Yes, sir. We've been watching Crowley for months, waiting for evidence we could use. When you 2 ran, when he sent armed men after you, he finally gave us what we needed. Barrett smiled grimly. Sometimes justice needs a push. You gave it one. Elena felt dizzy. It's over? The running part is. The legal part's just starting. We'll need your testimony against Crowley. Against all of them. But you're free, Miss Whitmore. No forced marriage, no contract. You're nobody's property, but your own. The revolver slipped from Elena's fingers. She put her face in her hands and started crying. Great heaving sobs that came from someplace deeper than fear or relief or exhaustion. Cole sat down beside her, not touching, just present. Solid, real. We made it, he said quietly. Elena looked at him through tears. What happens now? Cole smiled. Now we get to find out. The sun was fully up now, morning light flooding the canyon, burning away the shadows and the fear and the old life Elena had been running from. Ahead, everything was uncertain. But for the first time since her father signed that contract, uncertainty felt like possibility, and possibility felt like freedom. And freedom, Elena realized, was worth every risk they'd taken to reach it. The canyon was still littered with shell casings and blood and the evidence of violence, but beyond it, the mountains stretched north toward futures that hadn't been written yet. Elena stood up, legs shaking, body aching, heart pounding, and walked toward them. The marshal's camp sat in a shallow valley 3 miles from the canyon, hidden behind a stand of cottonwoods that made it invisible from the main trail. Barrett led them there in silence, his deputies flanking Crowley's men like they were moving explosives that might detonate at any moment. Pike rode with his hands bound behind him, blood crusting on his face from where he'd hit the ground, but his eyes never stopped moving, calculating, measuring, looking for any weakness he could exploit. Elena watched him from her horse and felt cold despite the morning heat. Men like Pike didn't stop being dangerous just because you put ropes on them. The camp was sparse but organized, 4 tents, a cook fire, horses picketed in a makeshift corral. 2 more deputies stood guard, and they straightened when Barrett rode in, their hands moving instinctively toward their weapons before they recognized who was approaching. "Secure the prisoners," Barrett ordered. "Double watch. These aren't drunk cowboys. They know what they're doing." The deputies moved efficiently, hauling Crowley's men off their horses and tying them to a heavy oak tree at the edge of camp. Pike went last, and he made eye contact with Elena as they dragged him past. "This isn't over, girl," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "Crowley owns half the territorial government. You think a few marshals scare him? You think he'll let you walk away?" "That's enough," Barrett snapped. Pike smiled. "She knows I'm right. She knows he's coming for her. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he's coming." One of the deputies backhanded him across the mouth. Pike spat blood and kept smiling. Elena dismounted on shaking legs and had to grab the saddle to keep from falling. Cole was beside her instantly, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "I've got you," he said. "I'm fine." "You're not, neither am I. We just survived a gunfight. Fine doesn't exist right now." Barrett walked over, pulling off his gloves. Up close, Elena could see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his stubble, the old scar that ran from his left ear to his jawline. This was a man who'd been doing dangerous work for a long time. "Let's talk," he said. "Both of you. Inside." The command tent was bigger than the others, with a folding table covered in maps and papers. Barrett gestured for them to sit on camp stools while he poured coffee from a battered pot. The liquid was thick and black and smelled like it could strip paint. "Drink it anyway," Barrett said when he saw Elena's expression. "You'll need it." The coffee tasted worse than it smelled, but it was hot and strong, and after the first sip, Elena felt her head start to clear. Across from her, Cole drank in silence, his eyes never leaving Barrett's face. "Start from the beginning," Barrett said. "I want to know everything. How the marriage contract came about, when you decided to run. Who helped you? Every detail." Elena glanced at Cole. He nodded slightly. So she told it. Her father's gambling debt. Crowley's offer. The wedding scheduled for Sunday. Meeting Cole at the forge. The decision to run. She left nothing out, even the parts that made her father look weak and herself look desperate. Barrett listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a piece of paper. When she finished, he sat back and studied her for a long moment. "Your father signed you over to settle a debt," he said. "That makes the contract a form of debt bondage, which is illegal under federal law." Crowley said it was legal. He filed it with the territorial court. "The territorial court is corrupt," Barrett said flatly. "Judge Morrison's been on Crowley's payroll for 3 years. We've known about it, just couldn't prove it until now." He turned to Cole. "And you, Mercer, where do you fit in this?" Cole set down his coffee cup. "I saw something wrong and tried to fix it. That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "I pulled your file before I rode out here. Cole Mercer, born in Kansas, worked as a tracker for the Pinkertons for 2 years before you quit, under circumstances nobody wants to talk about. After that, you disappear for 3 years. No records, no employment, nothing. Then you show up in Red Hollow 8 months ago and buy a forge with cash money." He leaned forward. "Where'd you go for those 3 years?" Cole's expression didn't change. "I was finding myself." "That's not an answer either." "It's all you're getting." They stared at each other across the table. Elena could feel the tension building. 2 men sizing each other up, trying to decide if the other was trustworthy or just good at pretending. Finally, Barrett sat back. "I don't care about your past, Mercer. I care about what happens next. You helped a woman escape forced marriage. That's the right thing to do. But you also started a war with the most powerful man in 3 counties, and wars have consequences." "I know," Cole said. "Do you?" "Because Crowley's not going to let this stand. He can't. If word gets out that a blacksmith and a girl made him look like a fool, every rancher and farmer he's been squeezing for years is going to start wondering if maybe he's not as invincible as he pretends. He'll come after you both with everything he has. Then we'll deal with it, Elena said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. We're not running anymore. Barrett looked at her with something that might have been respect. That's brave talk. But bravery doesn't stop bullets. You need more than courage. You need the law on your side. Is it on our side? It is now. Those men I arrested? They were operating under Crowley's orders, pursuing you with lethal intent for a crime that doesn't exist. That gives me grounds to bring charges against Crowley himself. Kidnapping conspiracy, violation of federal trafficking laws, corruption of territorial officials. Barrett's smile was cold. I've been building a case against him for 18 months. You two just gave me the final piece. What do you need from us? Cole asked. Testimony, both of you, on record, in front of a federal magistrate. Elena needs to describe the coercion, the threats, the forced contract. Cole needs to describe what he witnessed and why he intervened. With that, plus the evidence from today's chase, I can get federal warrants issued. Crowley won't be able to hide behind territorial jurisdiction anymore. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. You can actually stop him? I can try, but I need you to understand what you're signing up for. The moment you testify, you become targets. Not just from Crowley, from everyone whose livelihood depends on him. Politicians he's bribed, businessmen he's partnered with, even some lawmen who've been looking the other way. Barrett's voice was serious. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. How much uglier? Cole asked. Hard to say. Crowley's a coward at heart, but he's got resources, money, connections, men willing to do anything if the price is right. He might try to intimidate you into silence. He might try to discredit you. He might... Barrett paused. He might try to kill you. The tent went quiet. Outside, Elena could hear the prisoners talking in low voices, the sound of the deputies moving around camp, the distant call of a hawk hunting in the morning sky. When do we testify? She asked. Barrett blinked. You're not going to think about it? What's there to think about? You said you need our testimony to stop Crowley. So we'll testify. Elena, Cole started. No. She turned to him. You asked me in the canyon if I wanted to keep running or make them come to us. I chose to fight. I'm not changing my mind now just because it's going to be hard. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Barrett. What she said. Barrett shook his head slowly. You two are either the bravest people I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. He stood and walked to the tent entrance, looking out at the camp. I've got a magistrate riding circuit through Silver Creek right now. That's 2 days north. We can get you in front of him by the end of the week, get depositions recorded, start the legal process moving. And in the meantime, Cole asked, in the meantime, you stay with us. Under federal protection, nobody gets to you without going through my deputies first. Barrett turned back to them. It's not perfect, but it's the best I can offer. Elena stood, her legs still unsteady but holding. Then we accept. Good. There's a spare tent you can use. Get some rest. We'll head out for Silver Creek at first light tomorrow. Barrett paused at the entrance. One more thing. Your father, John Whitmore. What do you want me to do about him? The question hit Elena like cold water. She'd been so focused on escape, on survival, that she hadn't thought about what came after, what happened to her father once the dust settled. What would you normally do? She asked. Technically, he's complicit in an illegal contract. I could charge him as an accessory, but given the circumstances, the coercion, the debt, the power imbalance, I'd be inclined to show leniency, especially if you ask me to. Elena thought about her father, about the way he'd looked when he pushed that money across the kitchen table, about his last words, "Don't come back." There's nothing for you here. Let him go, she said finally. He's weak, not evil, and he's already living with what he did. That's punishment enough. Barrett nodded. I'll send word to Red Hollow that he's clear of charges. But Elena, you should know that by the time we're done, his life in that town is going to be hell. Crowley's friends won't forgive him for letting you escape. They'll make him pay. That's his problem now, not mine. Fair enough? Barrett left the tent, calling orders to his deputies. Elena and Cole stood there in the sudden silence, not quite looking at each other. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving behind exhaustion and delayed shock and the raw reality of what they'd survived. You should have thought about it more, Cole said quietly. The testimony. The target on your back. You should have taken time to consider what you're giving up. What am I giving up? Safety, anonymity, the chance to just disappear and start over somewhere nobody knows your name. Elena shook her head. I tried disappearing. It's called running, and I'm done with it. This is different. This is walking into the fire instead of away from it. Maybe that's what I need to do. Elena finally met his eyes. My whole life, I've been small, quiet, staying out of the way, not making trouble. And where did that get me? Sold like livestock to a monster. I'm tired of being small, Cole. I want to stand up. I want to fight back. I want people like Crowley to know they can't just take whatever they want. Cole studied her face. You've changed. Good. The old Elena was someone other people made decisions for. I don't want to be her anymore. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're going to be hell on wheels, aren't you? I hope so. He laughed then, short and surprised, like the sound had escaped before he could stop it. Come on, let's find that tent before we both fall over. The tent Barrett had assigned them was smaller than the command tent, but still spacious enough for 2 bedrolls and their gear. Someone had already laid out blankets and left a pitcher of water. Elena collapsed onto one of the bedrolls without bothering to remove her boots. I should check on the horses, Cole said from the entrance. You should sleep. In a minute, he left. Elena lay there staring at the canvas ceiling, her body exhausted but her mind still racing. Everything had happened so fast. Less than 24 hours ago, she'd been packing a saddlebag in her father's house, terrified and desperate. Now she was lying in a federal marshal's camp, about to testify against one of the most powerful men in the territory. She should have been scared. She was scared. But under the fear was something else, something hard and bright and new. Power. Not the kind Crowley had, built on money and threats and other people's weakness. This was different. This was the power that came from choosing your own path and refusing to be pushed off it. Elena closed her eyes and was asleep in seconds. She woke to the sound of voices arguing outside the tent. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory crashed back and she sat up fast, reaching for the revolver Cole had given her. Telling you, something's wrong, a voice was saying. One of Barrett's deputies. Nobody's that calm about getting arrested. Maybe he's just stupid, another voice replied. Pike's not stupid. He's a killer, but he's not stupid. Elena pushed through the tent flap and found 2 deputies standing near the prisoner's tree, speaking in low, urgent tones. Pike and the other captives sat in silence, but Pike was watching them with that same calculating expression he'd worn all morning. What's going on? Elena asked. The deputies turned. The older one, a lean man with a thick mustache, gestured toward Pike. That one keeps smiling. Been doing it for the last hour. Just sitting there, hands tied, grinning like he knows something we don't. Maybe he's lost his mind. Maybe. The deputy didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's got a plan we're missing. Barrett emerged from the command tent, buckling his gun belt. Problem? Pike's acting strange, sir. Pike's always strange. That's why he works for Crowley. Barrett walked over to the prisoners and squatted down in front of Pike. Something funny? Pike's smile widened. Just appreciating the morning, Marshal. Beautiful day. You're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, assault with intent, and conspiracy to violate federal law. You're looking at 20 years minimum. That funny to you? What's funny, Pike said slowly, is watching you all play Marshal while the real game happens somewhere else. Barrett's expression didn't change, but Elena saw his hand move closer to his revolver. What game? The one where Crowley's not some stupid rancher you can just arrest. The one where he's been 3 steps ahead of you since before you even knew my name. Pike leaned forward as far as his bonds allowed. You think catching us means anything? We're just ranch hands, hired muscle. You got nothing on Crowley himself. I've got motive. I've got intent. I've got witnesses. You've got a blacksmith and a runaway bride. That's not evidence. That's gossip. Pike's eyes flicked to Elena. And gossip don't hold up in territorial court. This isn't going to territorial court. It's federal. Is it, though? Pike's smile turned mean. Because I heard Judge Morrison's real friendly with the federal circuit judge. I heard they play cards together. I heard maybe that federal judge owes Morrison some favors. He paused. I heard a lot of things, Marshal, and what I heard is that you're pissing into the wind and calling it rain. Barrett stood up slowly. You're bluffing. Maybe. Or maybe I'm telling you how this ends. You testify. We all go to trial. Some judge who owes somebody a favor finds us innocent. We walk free. And then, Pike's eyes locked onto Elena again. Then it's just you and Crowley, and nobody wearing a badge to protect you. Shut up, Barrett said. She knows I'm right. Look at her face. She knows. One of the deputies hit Pike hard enough to knock him sideways. He came back up spitting blood, but still grinning. Worth it, he said. Barrett grabbed the deputy's arm. Enough. That's exactly what he wants. To make us lose control. To make us do something stupid. He turned to Elena. Don't listen to him. He's trying to scare you. It's working, Elena admitted. That's because he's good at it. But he's also desperate. If Crowley was as protected as Pike claims, we wouldn't have caught them at all. Crowley would have sent lawyers and writs, not gunmen and bullets. The fact that he went violent means he's scared too. Cole appeared beside Elena, his hair damp like he'd been washing at the creek. What'd I miss? Pike's being helpful, Barrett said dryly, explaining how Crowley is going to walk free and murder us all. Sounds like Pike. Cole looked at the prisoners without expression. You want me to shut him up? No. I want you to ignore him, both of you. Barrett raised his voice so all the deputies could hear. Triple watch tonight. Nobody sleeps unless someone else is awake. These men are professionals, and professionals don't give up just because they got caught. Stay alert. The deputies nodded and dispersed. Barrett pulled Elena and Cole aside, walking them away from the prisoners until they were out of earshot. He's trying to get inside your head, Barrett said quietly. Make you doubt. Make you scared. Make you run before you testify. Don't let him. What if he's right? Elena asked. What if Crowley does have connections we don't know about? What if all this is for nothing? Then we fight anyway. Because the alternative is letting men like Crowley do whatever they want and calling it law. Barrett's voice was hard. I've been a marshal for 23 years. I've seen corruption. I've seen power used wrong. And I've learned something important. These men, Crowley, Pike, all of them, they rely on good people giving up. They rely on fear winning. The moment we stop fighting back, they've already won. Pretty speech, Cole said. But speeches don't stop bullets. No. Training stops bullets. Vigilance stops bullets. And having more guns than the other guy stops bullets. Barrett smiled grimly. We've got all three. So let Pike talk. Let him try to scare you. It changes nothing. Elena wanted to believe him. She did believe him. But Pike's words kept circling in her head like vultures. Some judge who owes somebody a favor finds us innocent. We walk free. And then, I'm going to check the perimeter, Cole said. Make sure we don't have any surprises coming. Good idea. Take Henshaw with you. Barrett watched Cole walk away, then turned back to Elena. How are you holding up? Honestly. I don't know. Everything's moving so fast. Yesterday I was in my father's house. Now I'm in a camp surrounded by armed deputies, about to testify against a man who wants me dead. It doesn't feel real. It is real. And it's going to get more real before it's over. Barrett's expression softened slightly. But you're stronger than you think. Most people would have collapsed after what you've been through. You're still standing. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being scared that you make mistakes. He gestured toward the command tent. Come on. I want to go over your testimony. Make sure we've got all the details straight before we see the magistrate. They spent the next 2 hours in the tent, Barrett asking questions and Elena answering them, building a timeline of events that could be presented in court. It was exhausting work, dredging up every humiliating detail of her father's weakness and Crowley's predation. But Barrett was patient and methodical, never judging, just collecting facts. This is good, he said finally, setting down his pen. Detailed, specific. This kind of testimony is hard to discredit, unless the judge doesn't want to hear it. Elena. Barrett waited until she met his eyes. I know Pike got in your head, but you need to understand something. The federal judiciary isn't perfect, but it's not completely corrupt either. There are still honest judges out there. Still people who believe the law means something. And the magistrate we're seeing in Silver Creek, Cornelius Webb, he's one of them. Old school, by the book. If you testify in front of him, he'll listen. You're sure? As sure as I can be about anything. Barrett stood and stretched. Get some rest. We've got a long ride tomorrow. Elena left the tent and found the camp settling into evening routines. Someone had started a cook fire. The smell of salt pork and beans drifted through the air, making her stomach growl. She realized she hadn't eaten since yesterday. Cole was sitting near the fire, sharpening his knife with long, practiced strokes. He looked up when Elena approached and gestured to the space beside him. "Food's almost ready," he said. "Not good, but edible." Elena sat, watching the flames dance. "Pike was trying to scare us. I know. He might have succeeded. I know that too." Cole tested the knife's edge with his thumb, then kept sharpening. "But being scared doesn't mean he's right. It just means he's good at his job. What if Crowley does have judges on his payroll? What if this whole thing is just theater?" Cole was quiet for a moment, the rasp of stone on steel the only sound between them. "Then we deal with it. We find another way. We don't quit just because the first path might be blocked." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." He looked at her. "You asked me once why I was helping you. I never gave you a real answer. You said you were tired of doing nothing. That's part of it, but there's more." Cole set down the knife and whetstone. "My brother didn't just stand up to a corrupt man. He stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. A Mexican family that was being forced off their land. He died protecting them. And I watched it happen from across the street because I was too much of a coward to help him." Elena felt her throat tighten. "You were young. I was old enough to know better, old enough to choose, and I chose wrong." His voice was flat, factual, like he was describing weather. "So when I saw you in that forge, when I saw what was happening to you, I had a choice again. Do nothing and live with it, or do something and risk dying for it. And I realized something. Living with doing nothing is worse than dying trying to do something right. That's why you tore up the contract. That's why I tore up the contract. That's why I helped you run. That's why I'm sitting here right now, knowing Crowley is probably going to try to kill us both, and not regretting any of it." He picked up his knife again. "Fear's not the problem, Elena. Letting fear make your decisions for you is the problem." Elena watched the fire, thinking about choices and fear and the difference between the two. Pike had tried to make her afraid, and he'd succeeded. But Cole was right. Being afraid didn't mean giving up. It just meant understanding the stakes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not treating me like I'm breakable, for expecting me to be strong enough to handle the truth." Cole smiled slightly. "You charged into gunfire with a revolver you barely knew how to use. I think you proved you're not breakable." One of the deputies called that food was ready. They ate in silence, the salt pork tough and the beans underseasoned, but Elena was too hungry to care. Around them, the camp settled into night watch routines, deputies taking positions, checking weapons, maintaining the careful vigilance that kept dangerous men contained and innocent people alive. Later, lying in her bedroll with Cole on the other side of the tent, Elena stared at the darkness and tried to imagine what tomorrow would bring. The ride to Silver Creek, the magistrate's office, the moment when she'd have to stand up and tell the truth about what Crowley had tried to do to her. Pike's words kept echoing. "Some judge who owes somebody a favor finds us innocent. We walk free." But then she heard Cole's voice too. "Living with doing nothing is worse than dying trying to do something right." Elena closed her eyes and made a choice. Not about whether to be afraid, that wasn't optional, but about what she'd do with that fear. She'd use it, channel it, let it make her sharp instead of paralyzed. Tomorrow she'd testify, and whatever came after that, she'd face it standing up instead of on her knees. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. The fire crackled low. Guards paced their circuits, and Elena slept, dreaming of nothing at all. Morning came cold and gray, the sun hidden behind clouds that promised rain but never delivered. Barrett had them up before dawn, breaking camp with military efficiency. The prisoners were loaded onto horses with their hands bound and legs tied to stirrups, unable to run but able to ride. Pike glared at Elena as they secured him, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. This isn't over. They rode north in a column, Barrett at the front, deputies flanking the prisoners, Elena and Cole bringing up the rear. The landscape changed as they climbed higher into mountain country, badlands giving way to pine forests and rocky outcroppings. The air smelled different up here. Cleaner, colder. How far to Silver Creek? Elena asked. 12 miles, Barrett called back. We'll be there by afternoon if the weather holds. Barrett does. The weather didn't hold. Around mid-morning, the clouds opened up and rain came down in cold sheets, turning the trail into mud and soaking them all to the skin. Elena hunched in her saddle, water running down her neck, and tried not to think about how miserable she was. Could be worse, Cole said beside her. How? Could be snowing. Elena laughed despite herself. That's your idea of optimism? I'm a realist. Optimists expect things to get better. Realists just appreciate when they're not actively getting worse. The rain continued for 2 hours before finally easing to a drizzle. By then, Elena was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Barrett called a halt at a shallow cave formation and ordered fires lit. Warm up, he said. We'll wait out the worst of it. The deputies built fires deep in the cave where the rain couldn't reach. Elena huddled near one, holding her hands toward the flames, trying to remember what being warm felt like. Cole sat beside her, water dripping from his hat brim. You know the really stupid thing? Elena said. This time yesterday, I thought the worst was over. We'd been rescued. The marshals had us. I actually thought we were safe. We are safer than we were. Are we? Or are we just in a different kind of danger? Cole was quiet for a moment. Both, probably, but that's life in the territory. Nothing's ever completely safe. You just pick which danger you can live with and hope you chose right. One of the prisoners, not Pike, but a younger man with a scar across his cheek, spoke up from where he sat near the cave entrance. You're both dead, you know that? Crowley's not going to let this stand. He's going to hunt you until you're in the ground. Shut up, Reese, the deputy snapped. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Marshall can protect them for now, but what about later? What about next month, next year? Crowley's patient. He'll wait. And when their guard finally drops, I said shut up. Reese smiled. Just trying to be helpful. Barrett walked over and squatted in front of Reese. You're helpful when I ask you to be helpful. Otherwise, you're quiet. Understand? Yes, Sir Marshal. Quiet as a mouse. But the damage was done. Elena could feel doubt creeping back in, cold and insidious as the rain outside. Reese was right. Even if they testified, even if Crowley was arrested, what came after? The territory was vast and empty. Law enforcement was spread thin. A man with resources could hire killers who'd track her for months, waiting for the perfect moment. Stop, Cole said quietly. Stop what? Spiraling. I can see it in your face. You're catastrophizing. They're right, though. We can't hide forever. No. But we can fight, and we can win, and we can build something better than what we're running from. Cole's voice was steady. You want guarantees? There aren't any. Life doesn't work that way. But giving up because you're scared of what might happen means Crowley wins without ever having to fight you. That what you want? Elena looked at him. At this man who'd risked everything to help a stranger, who'd stood beside her in a canyon when the bullets started flying, who believed she was strong enough to survive what was coming even when she didn't believe it herself. No, she said, that's not what I want. Then stop listening to prisoners trying to break your spirit and start listening to yourself. The rain finally stopped an hour later. They mounted up and continued north, the trail muddy but passable. Elena rode in silence, watching the landscape change, trying to find that strength Cole seemed so certain she possessed. Silver Creek appeared in late afternoon, a mining town built into the side of a mountain. It was bigger than Red Hollow, maybe 60 buildings, with actual streets and a church with a real bell tower. The federal courthouse sat at the center of town, a solid brick building that looked like it had been transported from somewhere back east and dropped into the wilderness by accident. Barrett led them straight there, through streets full of curious onlookers who watched the column of riders with the kind of interest that meant gossip would be spreading before they even dismounted. Elena tried to ignore the stares, the pointing, the whispered conversations. The courthouse interior was cool and dim, smelling of wood polish and old paper. A clerk looked up from his desk as they entered, then scrambled to his feet when he recognized Barrett. Marshal, we weren't expecting you until next week. Plans changed? Is Magistrate Webb available? He's in chambers. Tell him I need to see him immediately. It's urgent. The clerk hurried away. Barrett turned to his deputies. Secure the prisoners in the holding cells. Make sure they're separated. I don't want them talking to each other. The deputies hauled Crowley's men toward a back hallway. Pike looked at Elena one last time as they dragged him away, and his smile was cold and knowing and full of promises. "Miss Whitmore," the clerk had returned. "Magistrate Webb will see you now." Barrett led Elena and Cole down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-faced judges and into a spacious office. Behind a massive desk sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite. White beard, wire-rimmed spectacles, shoulders that probably still remembered what hard labor felt like, even though he'd been wearing judicial robes for decades. Magistrate Cornelius Webb stood as they entered, studying them with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Marshal Barrett," he said. His voice was deep and measured. "Your message said this was urgent." "Yes, sir. I need to take depositions for a federal case. Possible trafficking, coercion, corruption of territorial officials." Webb's eyebrows rose. "That's quite an accusation. Who's being accused?" "Victor Crowley." The magistrate sat down slowly. "I see. And these are your witnesses?" "Elena Whitmore and Cole Mercer. They have first-hand knowledge of Crowley's operations." Webb gestured to chairs in front of his desk. "Sit. Tell me everything." Elena sat and felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. This was it. This was where she either stopped Crowley or failed trying, where she either found her voice or let fear silence her one more time. She took a breath and started talking. The words came easier than Elena expected. Maybe because she'd already told the story to Barrett, or maybe because Magistrate Webb had the kind of face that made lying seem impossible. She described her father's debt, Crowley's offer, the contract that turned her into property. Webb listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he set down his pen and studied her over his spectacles. "And you're prepared to testify to all of this under oath?" he asked. "Yes, sir. You understand that Victor Crowley will have attorneys, good ones. They'll try to discredit you. They'll suggest you're lying, that you're a runaway seeking attention, that this was all a misunderstanding." "Let them try," Elena said. Her voice was steady. "I know what happened. I know what he tried to do. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because it's uncomfortable." Something shifted in Webb's expression. Not quite approval, but close. He turned to Cole. "And you, Mr. Mercer, what's your role in this?" Cole described what he'd witnessed in Red Hollow, the forced contract, the armed men sent after them, the chase through the wilderness. He kept it factual, stripped of emotion, like he was reporting on someone else's life. Webb listened, then sat back in his chair with a heavy sigh. "I've heard rumors about Crowley for years. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable. But this," he gestured at his notes, "this changes everything. Marshal Barrett, you're requesting federal warrants?" "Yes, sir. For Crowley and anyone who aided him in this scheme. That includes Judge Morrison in Red Hollow, Sheriff Tully, and at least 4 other men we've identified as being on Crowley's payroll. That's a significant operation. You're talking about dismantling an entire corrupt network." "I'm talking about enforcing the law," Barrett said flatly, "regardless of who's violated it." Webb nodded slowly. "I'll need to review the depositions, consult with the territorial attorney, but preliminarily, I see grounds for arrest warrants on multiple charges." He looked at Elena. "Miss Whitmore, I want you to understand something. The moment I issue these warrants, you become a material witness in a federal case. That means you'll need to remain available for testimony. It also means you'll be a target for anyone who wants this case to disappear." "I understand. Do you? Because material witnesses have died before, had accidents, disappeared. Men like Crowley don't fight fair and they don't forgive easily." Elena met his eyes. "I'm already a target, magistrate. At least this way I'm fighting back." Webb studied her for a long moment, then turned to Barrett. "How soon can you serve the warrants?" "Give me 2 days. I'll take a full detail back to Red Hollow and arrest everyone simultaneously. That way they can't warn each other or destroy evidence." "Approved. I'll have the warrants ready by morning." Webb stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Mercer, you'll remain in Silver Creek under federal protection until the arrests are completed. Marshal Barrett will arrange accommodations." They left the courthouse as evening was falling over Silver Creek. The streets had emptied, shops closing for the night, lamps being lit in windows. Elena felt hollowed out, like she'd spent the last hour bleeding words instead of speaking them. "You did good in there," Barrett said as they walked toward the town's only hotel. Webb's a tough audience. He doesn't give approval easily. What happens now? Cole asked. Now I send deputies back to Red Hollow to keep watch on Crowley and his people. Make sure nobody runs before we can arrest them. Meanwhile, you two stay here, out of sight, until this is resolved. How long will that take? Hard to say. Few days at minimum. Could be longer if Crowley fights extradition or tries to tie things up in legal knots. Barrett stopped in front of the hotel, a two-story building that had seen better days. I've arranged rooms for you, second floor, facing the street. My deputies will be stationed downstairs and outside. Nobody gets to you without going through us first. Elena looked up at the hotel, at the yellowed curtains in the windows and the paint peeling from the doorframe. It looked tired, worn down by time and weather, and too many people passing through without caring enough to maintain it. She knew the feeling. The room Barrett gave her was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that overlooked Silver Creek's main street. Elena sat on the bed and stared at the wall, too exhausted to sleep, too wired to rest. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the town settling into night. Footsteps, voices, the distant sound of piano music from a saloon somewhere. Normal sounds. The sounds of people living normal lives, unaware that 2 floors below them sat deputies guarding a woman who'd just signed death warrants for half a dozen men. A knock at the door made her jump. She grabbed the revolver from her belt before remembering she was supposed to be safe here. It's Cole, a voice said from the hallway. Elena opened the door. Cole stood there holding 2 plates of food. Thought you might be hungry. Kitchen was closing, but I convinced them to make us something. The food was simple. Bread, cheese, cold chicken, but Elena's stomach growled at the sight of it. She let Cole in, and they ate sitting on the floor with their backs against the wall, plates balanced on their knees. Weird, isn't it? Cole said after a while. Being inside, having walls, having guards protecting us instead of chasing us. Feels temporary. It is temporary. Everything is. He took a bite of bread. But temporary doesn't mean worthless. Elena looked at him. You always this philosophical? Only when I'm tired. When I'm rested, I'm mostly just annoying. She laughed, and it felt strange in her chest, like her body had forgotten how. Thank you, Cole, for all of this. I know you didn't have to help me. Yeah, I did. Not helping wasn't an option. Why not? Cole was quiet for a long time, staring at his plate like it held answers. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. Because I spent 6 years being the kind of man who watches bad things happen and does nothing, and that kind of man wakes up every morning hating himself a little more. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to be someone different, or I'd have eaten a bullet by now. The honesty of it hit Elena like a fist. She'd spent so much time thinking about her own fear, her own desperation, that she hadn't really considered what this was costing Cole. He wasn't just helping her escape. He was trying to escape something himself. I'm sorry, she said. About your brother. About what happened to him. Me too, but being sorry doesn't change it. Only doing better changes anything. Cole set down his plate and stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. He left before Elena could respond. She sat there on the floor, listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway, and thought about the different ways people tried to outrun their pasts. Some ran toward bottles and oblivion like her father. Some ran toward violence and control like Crowley. And some, like Cole, ran toward redemption. She wondered which direction she was running. Sleep came in fragments that night, broken by dreams of canyon walls and gunfire and Pike's cold smile. Elena woke before dawn feeling more tired than when she'd gone to bed. She washed her face in cold water from the basin and stared at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. She looked different, older somehow, harder. The girl who'd stood in her father's kitchen holding a wedding dress was gone. In her place was someone Elena barely recognized. Someone who'd survived gunfights and testified against powerful men and still hadn't broken. She wasn't sure if she liked this new version of herself yet, but at least she was still standing. Barrett knocked on her door as morning light was filling the street outside. We're moving out in an hour, heading back to Red Hollow to execute the warrants. Can I come with you? Absolutely not. You stay here where it's safe. Safe? Elena heard her voice rise. Crowley's men know I'm alive. They know I testified. Staying here just makes me a sitting target. Staying here keeps you under federal protection. Coming with us puts you in the middle of what's likely to be a violent arrest situation. Barrett's expression softened slightly. I know you want to see this through, but the best thing you can do right now is stay alive long enough to testify at trial. He left before she could argue further. Elena stood at the window and watched the marshals prepare to leave, checking weapons, saddling horses, moving with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done dangerous work too many times to be nervous about it anymore. Cole appeared in the street below, leading his black gelding. He looked up at Elena's window and raised one hand in a half wave. She waved back, feeling a tightness in her chest that she couldn't quite name. Then the marshals mounted up and rode out of Silver Creek in a column, heading south toward Red Hollow and whatever violence waited there. Elena watched until they disappeared around a bend in the road. Then she sat on the bed and tried to figure out what to do with herself for the next few days while other people fought battles on her behalf. The waiting was worse than the running had been. At least when they were fleeing through the wilderness, she'd had something to do, someone to be. Now she was just a witness in a hotel room, guarded by deputies who barely spoke to her, counting hours until Barrett returned. She tried to read a newspaper someone left in the hallway, but the words wouldn't stick in her mind. Tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Pike's face, or heard Crowley's smooth voice, or felt her father's signature on that contract like it was burned into her skin. By the second day, Elena was pacing her room like a caged animal. One of the deputies, a young man named Fisher, who couldn't have been more than 25, brought her meals and looked at her with a mixture of pity and nervousness. "Any word from Marshal Barrett?" she asked when Fisher delivered lunch. "Not yet, miss, but that's normal. These things take time." "How much time?" "Hard to say. Depends on how much resistance they encounter." Fisher shifted his weight uncomfortably. "But the marshal's good at what he does. He'll be back." He left quickly, like being around her made him nervous. Elena didn't blame him. She was starting to make herself nervous. The afternoon dragged into evening. Elena stood at her window watching Silver Creek citizens go about their business, shopping, gossiping, living their lives without knowing or caring that somewhere south of here, federal marshals were trying to arrest a small-town tyrant who thought he owned the world. Night fell. Still no word. Elena lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the hotel settling into sleep. Footsteps in the hallway. Doors closing. The creak of floorboards. Normal sounds that should have been comforting but instead made her more alert, more tense, waiting for the one sound that didn't belong. It came sometime after midnight. Not a sound exactly, more like the absence of sound. The sudden quiet that meant something had changed. Elena sat up slowly, reaching for the revolver on the nightstand. Her heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. She'd learned something in that canyon. Fear didn't have to mean paralysis. It could mean readiness. A floorboard creaked outside her door, too light to be Fisher's heavy boots, too careful to be casual. Elena slid off the bed and moved to the wall beside the door, out of the line of fire if someone shot through it. She cocked the revolver, the click impossibly loud in the silence. "Miss Whitmore?" A voice whispered from the hallway. Not Fisher, not any of the deputies she'd met. "You awake?" Elena didn't answer, didn't move, just waited. "I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing." The voice was male, middle-aged, with an accent she couldn't place. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need to talk to you. It's about Crowley. Talk through the door." A low laugh. "Smart girl. Okay. Through the door. My name's David Chen. I'm a banker in Red Hollow, or I was, until Crowley decided he wanted my bank for himself." Elena's mind raced. Chen. The same last name as the woman who ran the general store. Family, probably. "What do you want?" "To warn you. Crowley knows about the warrants. Someone in the magistrate's office tipped him off. He's not in Red Hollow anymore. He ran." Ice water dumped down Elena's spine. "You're lying." "I wish I was. But I saw him leave 2 nights ago. Him and a dozen men, all armed, heading north. They're coming here, Miss Whitmore. They're coming for you." The marshals, Erschöpfut, rode into a trap. Crowley left enough men behind to make it look like he was still there, then slipped out the back door. By the time Barrett figures out he's gone, it'll be too late. Chen's voice dropped lower. "You need to run, right now, before Crowley gets here." Elena's throat was tight. "Why should I believe you?" Because if I was working for Crowley, you'd already be dead. I'd have kicked in this door and shot you through the window. I'm trying to save your life." "Why?" "Because Crowley destroyed my family's business, ruined my reputation, drove my brother to drink himself to death. And because I'm tired of watching him win." Footsteps retreated down the hallway. "There's a back staircase at the end of the hall. Takes you to the alley behind the hotel. There's a horse tied there. Not much, but it'll get you out of town. Ride north into the high country and don't stop until you hit Copper Ridge." "Wait." But Chen was already gone, his footsteps fading into silence. Elena stood frozen, her mind spinning. Was he telling the truth? Or was this exactly what Crowley wanted? To scare her into running so his men could catch her alone on the trail? She couldn't know, and not knowing meant choosing. Stay and hope Chen was lying. Run and hope he wasn't. Elena thought about Pike's words in the canyon. Crowley's patient. He'll wait. Thought about Barrett's confidence that the warrants would work. Thought about Cole riding south toward a trap he didn't know existed. She made her decision. Elena grabbed her saddlebag and the few belongings she had. Checked the revolver cylinder, still loaded, 5 rounds left. Opened the door and looked both ways down the hallway. Empty. Too empty. Where were the deputies? Fisher was supposed to be on watch. Someone was always supposed to be on watch. Elena moved quickly down the hallway toward the back staircase Chen had mentioned. Her boots were too loud on the wooden floor. Every shadow looked like an ambush. Every closed door like it might burst open and spill armed men into the hallway. The back staircase was narrow and dark, smelling of old wood and mildew. Elena descended carefully, one hand on the wall, the other holding the revolver. The door at the bottom opened onto an alley, and tied to a post was a horse, just like Chen had said. A brown mare, saddled and ready. Elena approached slowly, scanning the alley, the rooftops, the dark windows overlooking the space. Nothing moved. No one shouted. No gunfire erupted. She untied the horse and swung into the saddle, her body protesting after 2 days of inactivity. The mare shifted beneath her, nervous but manageable. Elena kicked the horse into motion and rode out of the alley into Silver Creek's empty streets. Behind her, the hotel stood dark and silent. In front of her, the trail north disappeared into mountain darkness. And somewhere between here and safety, Elena Whitmore stopped being a protected witness and became a fugitive again. The ride north was nightmare-made geography. Elena pushed the mare hard, following trails by moonlight, trusting the horse's instincts more than her own failing sense of direction. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow could have been Crowley's men closing in. She didn't know if Chen had been telling the truth. Didn't know if she'd just escaped a trap or ridden straight into one. All she knew was that staying in that hotel had felt wrong in a way she couldn't ignore. Dawn found her high in the mountains, exhausted and lost, the mare stumbling with fatigue. Elena pulled to a stop near a creek and dismounted on shaking legs. The horse drank gratefully while Elena splashed cold water on her face and tried to think. Copper Ridge. Chen had said to ride for Copper Ridge, but Elena had no idea where that was, or how far she'd come, or whether she was even heading in the right direction. She was about to remount when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses. Coming fast from the south. Elena grabbed the mare's reins and pulled her into a stand of pine trees, hand over the horse's nose to keep her quiet. Through the branches, she watched 3 riders appear on the trail below. Not marshals, not deputies. Crowley's men. She recognized 2 of them from Red Hollow. Hard-faced ranch hands who spent more time practicing with guns than ropes. They pulled to a stop near the creek, scanning the area. One of them dismounted and studied the muddy ground. "Fresh tracks," he called to the others. "Can't be more than 20 minutes ahead." "How do you know it's her?" "Single rider, light horse, moving fast and sloppy. Who else would it be?" The tracker remounted. "She's heading for the high passes, probably trying to reach Copper Ridge." "Good. The boss said if she runs for Copper Ridge, we've got her. There's only one trail through the passes, and it's a dead end if you don't know the territory." They kicked their horses forward, following Elena's trail with grim determination. Elena waited until they were out of sight, then moved deeper into the trees, her mind racing. They knew where she was going. They knew the trail was a trap, which meant Chen had either betrayed her or been forced to give false information. Either way, she couldn't go to Copper Ridge. Elena turned the mare west, away from the trail, into virgin forest where no path existed. It would be harder, slower, but at least it wouldn't lead her straight into Crowley's arms. She rode through the morning, fighting through underbrush and deadfall, the mare struggling over terrain that wasn't meant for horses. Elena's arms were scratched bloody from branches. Her legs ached from gripping the saddle, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. By noon, she'd reached a ridge overlooking a valley she didn't recognize. Smoke rose from a cluster of buildings far below. Too big to be a ranch, too small to be a proper town. Maybe a mining camp or a lumber operation. Elena studied it, trying to decide if riding toward people was safer than staying alone in the wilderness. Before she could choose, she heard voices behind her. There! Elena spun the mare around and saw riders emerging from the trees. Not 3 this time. 7. All armed. All focused on her with the kind of intensity that meant they'd been hunting too long to give up now. Pike was in the lead, his face still bruised from the marshal's capture, his eyes bright with malice. End of the line, girl, he called out. Nowhere left to run. Elena kicked the mare hard. The horse lunged forward down the ridge, hooves skidding on loose rock, nearly falling twice. Behind her, the riders gave chase, closing the distance with better horses and better knowledge of the terrain. She burst out of the trees into a clearing and pulled up short. Ahead of her was a cliff. Sheer drop, maybe 200 feet, with nothing but rocks and death at the bottom. Behind her, Pike and his men were spreading out in a semicircle, cutting off escape. Elena was trapped. She dismounted and faced them, revolver in hand, knowing 5 bullets weren't enough. Knowing this was how it ended. Alone. Cornered. Dying in some anonymous clearing in the mountains while Crowley won again. Pike dismounted slowly, his hand on his gun but not drawing. Not yet. You led us on a hell of a chase, I'll give you that. But it's over now. Lower the gun and come quiet. Mr. Crowley wants you alive if possible. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Elena said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Even a bad one. Pike's eyes narrowed. You'd rather die than come back? I'd rather die than belong to Victor Crowley. Yes. For a moment, something flickered across Pike's face. Not quite respect. More like recognition. The understanding that passed between 2 people who'd both been cornered by life and refused to surrender quietly. Then he drew his gun. Elena raised hers. And before either of them could fire, gunshots erupted from the tree line. Not from Pike's men, from somewhere else. Multiple rifles firing in controlled bursts, the sound echoing off the cliff face. One of Crowley's riders fell from his saddle. Then another. Pike spun, trying to locate the shooters, and took a round through his shoulder that knocked him backward. Men burst from the trees. Not Crowley's men. These wore badges. Federal badges. And at their head, riding a black gelding and firing with cold precision, was Cole Mercer. Get down! He shouted at Elena. She dropped flat as bullets screamed over her head. The clearing erupted into chaos. Crowley's men returning fire. Marshals pressing forward, horses screaming and men shouting, and the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Elena crawled toward the tree line, keeping low, her revolver still in her hand but useless in this kind of fight. She reached the cover of a fallen log and looked back. Cole was off his horse, using it for cover, firing methodically. Barrett was beside him, directing his deputies with hand signals. They moved like a military unit, coordinated and disciplined, pushing Crowley's men back toward the cliff edge. Pike was still standing, blood streaming from his shoulder, firing one-handed. He locked eyes with Elena across the clearing and raised his gun. Elena raised hers. They fired simultaneously. Both missed. But Pike's second shot didn't. It hit the log beside Elena's head, showering her with splinters. She fired back, aiming for center mass like Cole had taught her, not trying for a kill shot, just trying to make him stop. The revolver clicked empty. Pike smiled and started walking toward her, raising his gun. Then Cole was there, tackling Pike from the side, both men going down hard. They rolled, grappling, Pike's gun flying away into the grass. The fight was brutal and desperate. Pike was bigger. Cole was faster. They traded blows that would have dropped normal men, both of them fighting with the kind of viciousness that came from having nothing left to lose. Pike got his hands around Cole's throat. Cole drove his knee into Pike's injured shoulder. Pike screamed and released him. Cole grabbed a rock and brought it down hard. Pike stopped moving. The clearing went quiet. Crowley's men were down or fleeing or hands in the air, surrendering. The marshals were regaining control. And Elena was still alive somehow, despite every plan to the contrary. Cole stood slowly, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles. He walked over to where Elena sat behind the log and squatted down beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Elena looked at him, at this man who kept showing up to save her life. "How did you find me?" "Tracked you. You're not as hard to follow as you think." He helped her stand. "And before you ask, yes, it was a trap in Red Hollow. And yes, we figured it out too late. And yes, I told Barrett we needed to turn around immediately because you were in danger. Chen is dead. Crowley killed him after he warned you, left his body in the hotel alley." Cole's voice was flat. "But he bought you enough time to run. That's something." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes. "He didn't even know me." Sometimes that's when it's easiest to be brave, when you don't have time to think about consequences. Cole looked at her seriously. "Are you hurt?" "I don't think so." "Good. Because we need to move." This was just the advance group. Crowley's got more men coming, and we're still a long way from safety. Barrett appeared, holstering his pistol. His face was grim. "Mount up. We're riding for the territorial capital. It's 3 days north, but it's the only place with enough law enforcement to hold Crowley once we catch him." "If we catch him," Cole said. "When we catch him." Barrett's voice was hard. "This ends now. No more running. No more close calls. We take Crowley down or we die trying." They rode north with the sun climbing toward noon, leaving the clearing and its dead behind. Elena rode beside Cole, too exhausted to speak, too numb to process what had just happened. She'd almost died. Again. And only luck and Cole's timing had kept her alive. How much longer could that luck hold? The question hung in Elena's mind as they rode through mountain passes that seemed to stretch forever. 3 days to the territorial capital. 3 days of exposed trails and uncertain shelter, and the constant knowledge that Crowley's men could be anywhere, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Barrett pushed them hard, stopping only to rest the horses and refill canteens at mountain streams. They ate in the saddle, dried meat and hardtack that tasted like sawdust, and spoke little except to confirm directions or warn about terrain. The deputies rode in formation around Elena, treating her like precious cargo that might shatter if handled wrong. She hated it, hated being protected, hated feeling helpless while everyone else carried the weight of keeping her alive. By the second night, they'd reached a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter from the wind that had started howling through the passes. Barrett posted guards in shifts while the rest tried to sleep on cold ground with thin bedrolls. Elena sat away from the others, staring at the fire someone had built in a small depression that hid the flames from distant eyes. Cole found her there, carrying 2 cups of coffee that had gone lukewarm. "You should eat something," he said, settling beside her. "Not hungry." "Eat anyway. Your body needs fuel even if your stomach disagrees." Elena took the coffee, but didn't drink it. "Chen's dead because he helped me." "Chen's dead because Crowley killed him. Those are different things." "Are they? If I hadn't run, if I'd stayed in that hotel, you'd probably be dead too, or captured. Chen gave you information and you used it to survive. That's not your fault." Cole's voice was patient but firm. "You can't take responsibility for every death in Crowley's wake. That's his burden, not yours." "It doesn't feel that way." "I know, but feelings aren't facts." He took a sip of his own coffee and grimaced. "This is terrible." Despite everything, Elena felt a smile tug at her mouth. "Then why are you drinking it?" "Because it's hot and it's liquid, and that's enough right now." Cole set down the cup and looked at her seriously. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What are you going to do when this is over? After Crowley's arrested? After the trial? After everything?" Elena hadn't let herself think that far ahead. The future felt like a luxury she couldn't afford when survival was still uncertain. "I don't know. Go somewhere Crowley's never heard of, probably. Start over." "That's running." "Maybe running's smart. Maybe. Or maybe you've already proven you're stronger than that." Cole shifted, getting comfortable against the rock face. "Barrett offered me a deputy marshal position. Said I've got the skills and the instincts for the work." Elena looked at him in surprise. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to." Likes the idea of doing something that matters instead of just shoeing horses and trying to forget who I used to be. He paused. But another part remembers what it costs. The danger, the violence, the way it changes you to spend your life chasing bad men through bad country. You're already changed, though. We both are. Yeah, but there's changed and then there's broken. I'm trying to figure out which one I am. Elena understood that. She'd been asking herself the same question since they left Red Hollow. I think broken people don't worry about whether they're broken. They just are. Cole considered that. So the fact that we're asking means we're not? Or it means we're broken enough to recognize it, but not broken enough to stop caring? That's cheerful. I'm not feeling particularly cheerful right now. Elena finally took a sip of the coffee. It was indeed terrible. Do you think we'll actually make it to the capital? Honestly, I don't know. Crowley's desperate now. Desperate men do stupid things, dangerous things. Cole looked out at the darkness beyond their small camp. But Barrett's good at his job, and we've made it this far. That counts for something. Does it? Or are we just lucky? Luck's part of survival. But so is skill. So is determination. You've got both of those, Elena. Give yourself some credit. One of the deputies called out that his watch was ending. Another rose to replace him. The careful rhythm of men who knew that letting their guard down for even a moment could mean death. Elena finished her coffee and stood, her body protesting the movement. I should try to sleep. Elena? Cole's voice stopped her. Back in that clearing, when Pike had his gun on you, you didn't freeze, didn't panic. You fought back. I ran out of bullets. Before that, you stood your ground. He met her eyes. That's not something you can teach. Either you've got it or you don't. You've got it. The words settled into Elena's chest, heavy and warm and unexpected. She'd spent so much time feeling afraid, feeling small, that she hadn't noticed she'd also been brave. Brave enough to run. Brave enough to fight. Brave enough to keep going when stopping would have been easier. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me as more than someone who needs saving. Cole smiled slightly. You stopped being just someone who needs saving the moment you stepped into my forge and decided to fight back. Everything after that was just you proving it. Elena lay down on her bedroll and pulled the thin blanket over herself. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the sound of wind and distant animal calls and the quiet conversations of deputies changing watch. But when morning came, she felt different, steadier, like something inside her had shifted from fear to determination. The third day brought them down out of the high passes into rolling foothills. The territorial capital appeared in the distance around midday. A real city with brick buildings and paved streets and more people than Elena had seen in one place in her entire life. Barrett led them straight to the federal courthouse, a massive building that made Silver Creek's courthouse look like a child's playhouse. Armed guards stood at every entrance. Barrett dismounted and spoke briefly to one of them, showing his badge and paperwork. The guard nodded and gestured them inside. The interior was all marble and wood paneling and the kind of quiet that came from serious people doing serious work. Barrett led them to an office on the third floor where a nameplate on the door read, U.S. Marshal Thomas Caldwell, District Chief. Caldwell was a big man with a military bearing and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. He listened without interrupting as Barrett explained the situation. Crowley's crimes, the pursuit, the deaths, Elena's testimony. When Barrett finished, Caldwell sat back in his chair and studied Elena with frank assessment. You're the witness, he said. Not a question. A statement of fact. Yes, sir. Barrett tells me you've testified before Magistrate Webb, that you're willing to testify at trial. Yes, sir. And you understand that Victor Crowley has connections throughout the territory, that even here in the capital, he has friends in positions of power. Elena felt her stomach tighten. I understand. Caldwell nodded slowly. Good. Because I need you to understand something else. The moment you walked into this building, you became the most important witness in the most high-profile corruption case this territory has seen in a decade. That makes you valuable. It also makes you a target. He leaned forward. I can protect you, but only if you stay where my men can see you. That means no running, no deciding you know better than trained marshals, no heroics. The words were clearly aimed at what had happened in Silver Creek. Elena felt heat rise in her face. I was trying to survive. I know, and you did. But Chen died helping you, and we nearly lost you in that clearing. So from now on, you follow orders. Understood? Elena wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she'd survived this long by trusting her instincts, not by blindly following rules. But Caldwell's expression made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. Understood, she said. Good. Marshal Barrett, get her settled in protective custody. I want guards on her 24 hours. Nobody gets access without my approval. Caldwell turned to Cole. Mercer, Barrett says you've been instrumental in keeping Miss Whitmore alive. I've helped, sir. That's modest. Barrett's report suggests you're the reason she's not dead 3 times over. Caldwell pulled out a sheet of paper and slid it across his desk. I'm offering you a temporary deputy marshal commission. Effective immediately, you'll be assigned to Miss Whitmore's protective detail until the trial concludes. Cole picked up the paper and read it slowly. Why? Because she trusts you. Because you've proven you can handle yourself in dangerous situations. And because I need people I can rely on, and Barrett vouches for you. Caldwell's voice was businesslike. This is temporary. Once the trial's over, we'll discuss whether it becomes permanent. But for now, I need to know you're in. Cole looked at Elena. She tried to read his expression but couldn't. Whatever he was thinking, he was keeping it locked down tight. I'm in, he said finally. Caldwell stood. Then let's get Miss Whitmore somewhere safe. We've got a secure building 2 blocks from here. Used to be a bank. Now it's where we house witnesses who need extra protection. Guards at every entrance. No windows facing the street. It's not comfortable, but it's secure. The building Caldwell described turned out to be exactly as advertised. A squat brick structure with bars on the windows and armed guards watching the street. Elena was given a room on the 2nd floor that was barely bigger than a cell. Bed, chair, small table, washstand. Nothing personal, nothing warm. Just a place to exist until she was needed. Home sweet home, Cole said from the doorway. He'd been assigned the room next to hers. At least there's a roof. At least there's that. Elena sat on the bed and immediately regretted it. The mattress felt like it was stuffed with rocks. How long until the trial? Caldwell said 2 weeks minimum. They need time to gather evidence, prepare witnesses, build the case. Cole leaned against the doorframe. That's 2 weeks of sitting in this building, waiting. I'm getting good at waiting. Nobody's good at waiting. We just get used to being bad at it. He pushed off the doorframe. I'm going to check the perimeter. Make sure I know all the exits and approaches. You should rest. You look exhausted. I am exhausted. I've been exhausted since Red Hollow. Elena lay back on the terrible mattress and stared at the ceiling. Cole? Thank you for taking the deputy position, for staying. Where else would I go? He smiled slightly. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't climb out a window and try to solve this yourself. He left before Elena could respond. She lay there listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway, then the sound of him talking to the guards posted at the stairs. Normal sounds, safe sounds. She should have felt relieved, should have felt grateful. Instead, she just felt trapped. The days that followed blurred together into a monotonous routine. Elena woke, ate breakfast brought by guards who wouldn't meet her eyes, spent hours staring at walls or reading newspapers that were 3 days old by the time they reached her, ate lunch, stared at walls some more, ate dinner, slept fitfully, and started over. Cole visited daily, bringing updates about the case when he had them. Crowley had been spotted in 3 different locations, all unconfirmed. The territorial government was in chaos, with multiple officials resigning rather than face questions about their connections to him. Judge Morrison had fled to Mexico. Sheriff Tully had been arrested trying to destroy evidence. The whole system's collapsing, Cole said one evening, sitting in the single chair while Elena sat on the bed. Turns out, when you pull one thread, the entire rotten tapestry comes apart. Good, Elena said. Let it collapse. Maybe something better will grow in its place. Maybe, or maybe someone worse will step into the power vacuum. That's how it usually works. You're cheerful today. I'm realistic. I've seen this before. Powerful man falls. His empire crumbles. And then someone just as bad or worse takes his place because nature abhors a vacuum, and human nature abhors leaving power unclaimed. Elena studied him. You really think it won't matter? Everything we've done? Everything we've survived? I think it'll matter to the people Crowley hurt directly. To you. to Chen's family, to everyone he destroyed. Cole's voice was tired. But I don't think it'll change the fundamental problem. There will always be men like Crowley, always be people willing to look the other way as long as they get paid. The best we can do is stop the ones we can reach and hope it makes a difference. That's depressing. Yeah, but it's also honest. He stood and stretched. Barrett wants to prep you for testimony tomorrow. Go over your statement again. Make sure there's no holes the defense can exploit. The next day, Elena sat across from Barrett and a territorial prosecutor named Samuel Wexler, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Wexler was thin and nervous, constantly adjusting his spectacles and shuffling papers. Miss Whitmore, he said, his voice reedy, I need you to understand that defending this case is going to be difficult. Crowley has retained the best attorneys money can buy. They're going to attack your credibility, suggest you're lying for attention or money, paint you as a hysterical woman making false accusations. Let them try, Elena said. They will try, and they'll be good at it, so we need to make sure your testimony is bulletproof. Wexler pulled out a sheet of paper covered in notes. Tell me again about the first time Crowley approached your father about the marriage contract. Elena told the story again, and again, and again. Each time, Wexler found new questions, new angles, new ways the defense might attack her version of events. It was exhausting and demoralizing, like being cross-examined by someone who was supposed to be on her side. You're hesitating when I ask about your father's state of mind, Wexler said after the fifth retelling. The defense will notice that. They'll suggest you're embellishing or making assumptions. I'm hesitating because talking about my father's weakness is painful, Elena snapped. Not because I'm lying. I know that. But the jury won't know that unless you control your emotions on the stand. You need to be calm, factual, no anger, no tears, just clear, consistent testimony. You want me to be a robot. I want you to be credible. There's a difference. Wexler set down his papers and looked at her with something approaching sympathy. I know this is hard, but if you break down on the stand, if you show emotion, the defense will use it against you. They'll suggest you're unstable, that your judgment can't be trusted. Elena felt something hot and dangerous building in her chest. So I'm supposed to describe being sold like livestock without showing any feeling about it. I'm supposed to talk about Crowley trying to own me like I'm discussing the weather? Yes, that's exactly what I need you to do. That's not human. It's survival. It's how you win cases against men with unlimited resources and better lawyers. Wexler's voice was firm. I understand it's not fair. I understand it's asking you to perform instead of just tell the truth. But this is the system we have. And if you want to beat Crowley within that system, you need to play by its rules. Barrett, who'd been quiet throughout the prep session, finally spoke up. Wexler's right. I hate it, but he's right. The moment you show vulnerability on that stand, they'll exploit it. Elena looked between them. These men who were supposed to be helping her, who were instead teaching her how to bury her humanity in order to be believed. What if I can't do that? What if I get up there and the anger comes out anyway? Then we'll probably lose, Wexler said bluntly, and Crowley will walk free, and everything you've survived will have been for nothing. The words hit like a physical blow. Elena stood up, needing to move, needing air. She walked to the small window and stared out at the street below. People going about their lives, shopping, talking, laughing, living in a world where they didn't have to perform their trauma for strangers' approval. I'll do it, she said finally. I'll be your perfect witness. I'll bury everything I feel and give you the testimony you need. Miss Whitmore, Barrett started. Don't. Just don't. Elena turned to face them. You've made it clear what you need from me. I'll deliver, but don't expect me to be grateful about it. She left the room before either of them could respond, walking past the guards, up the stairs, back to her cell-like room. Cole was in the hallway and started to speak, but Elena brushed past him and closed her door firmly. She sat on the bed and let the anger burn through her. Anger at Wexler for reducing her trauma to legal strategy. Anger at Barrett for agreeing with him. Anger at the system that demanded she perform victimhood in exactly the right way or be dismissed as unreliable. Most of all, anger at herself for agreeing to play along. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. Elena? Cole's voice. Can I come in? No. He came in anyway, closed the door behind him and leaned against it. Wexler's an ass. Wexler's a realist. Apparently that's the same thing now. He's also right, which makes it worse. Cole walked over and sat in the chair. But he's wrong about one thing. You're not going to lose that jury by showing emotion. You're going to win them by being real. That's not what he said. Because he's thinking like a lawyer, not like a person. Juries aren't stupid. They can tell when someone's performing versus when someone's telling the truth. And the truth includes emotion. It includes anger. It includes pain. Cole's voice was gentle. Don't be a robot, Elena. Be yourself. That's the most powerful testimony you can give. And if Wexler's right, if showing how I feel makes them think I'm unstable, then they're idiots and we appeal. But I don't think it'll come to that. He leaned forward. I've been watching you for weeks now. You know what I've learned? You're at your strongest when you're being honest. When you stopped pretending you weren't scared in that canyon. When you told Webb exactly what Crowley tried to do. When you called your father weak to his face. That's when you're powerful, not when you're performing. Elena felt the anger start to drain away, replaced by something more complicated. You have a lot of faith in me. Yeah, I do. Cole stood. Get some rest. Trial starts in 3 days. You're going to need your strength. The 3 days passed in a haze of nervous energy and constant preparation. Wexler drilled her relentlessly on her testimony until Elena could recite it in her sleep. Barrett reviewed security protocols, explaining how she'd be transported to and from the courthouse, where she'd wait between sessions, what to do if something went wrong. The night before the trial, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through her testimony in her mind, imagining all the ways it could go wrong. Around midnight, she gave up and walked to the small common room at the end of the hall. Cole was already there, sitting at a table with a deck of cards laid out in a solitaire game. He looked up when she entered. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. How did you guess? Because I know what the night before something dangerous feels like. Your body knows sleep would be smart, but your brain won't shut up long enough to let it happen. He gestured to the chair across from him. Want to play something? Might help. They played poker for an hour using matchsticks as chips. Neither of them particularly focused on the game. It was just something to do. A way to pass time until morning came and Elena had to walk into a courtroom and face the man who'd tried to own her. Cole, Elena said as he dealt another hand, if this goes wrong, if Crowley walks free, promise me something. Don't talk like that. Promise me you'll keep fighting, that you won't give up just because I failed. Cole set down the cards and looked at her seriously. You're not going to fail. But if somehow, against all reason, the jury's corrupt or stupid or both, he paused. Then, yeah, I'll keep fighting, because that's what we do now. We fight until we can't anymore. That's all I wanted to hear. They played until dawn light started filtering through the windows. Then they went to their rooms to prepare. Elena washed her face, changed into the simple dress Barrett had provided, nothing fancy, nothing that would make her look like she was trying too hard, and tried to calm her racing heart. The transport to the courthouse was tense and silent. Guards surrounded the carriage. Barrett rode ahead, his hand never far from his gun. The streets were crowded with people who'd heard about the trial and wanted to witness it. Elena saw them pointing, whispering, staring at her like she was some kind of curiosity. The courthouse was massive and intimidating, with columns that stretched 3 stories high and steps that seemed designed to make you feel small. Elena climbed them with Cole on one side and Barrett on the other, feeling every eye on her, knowing that somewhere in this building, Crowley was waiting. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing in the back. Elena was led to a small room off to the side, a witness waiting area, while the proceedings got started. She could hear the judge calling the court to order, the lawyers making opening statements, the careful theater of justice playing out without her. Then a bailiff opened the door. Miss Whitmore, you're up. Elena stood on shaking legs. Cole touched her arm. Remember, be yourself, tell the truth. That's all you need to do. She nodded and followed the bailiff into the courtroom, and stopped cold when she saw Victor Crowley sitting at the defense table. He looked different than she remembered, smaller somehow, less imposing. Just a middle-aged man in an expensive suit watching her with cold calculation. But his eyes were the same. Still confident, still certain he'd win, still convinced that money and power would protect him from consequences. Elena walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and sat down. The prosecutor, Wexler, stood and gave her an encouraging nod. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "please tell the court how you first learned about Victor Crowley's intention to marry you." Elena took a breath, looked at the jury, saw regular people, farmers and shopkeepers and craftsmen, looking back at her with curiosity and skepticism, and she told them the truth. Not the sanitized version Wexler wanted, not the emotionless recitation of facts designed to play well with the jury. Elena told them what it felt like to discover her father had signed away her freedom for $300 and a bottle of whiskey. What it felt like to look at Victor Crowley and know that he saw her as property, not a person. What it felt like to realize that everyone in Red Hollow knew what was happening and nobody was going to stop it. She told them about the fear, the anger, the desperate moment in Cole's Forge when a stranger showed more humanity than her own father had. Wexler tried to interrupt several times to steer her back toward the prepared testimony, but Elena ignored him. She wasn't performing anymore. She was just speaking, letting the words flow out raw and unfiltered, the way truth always came when you stopped trying to control it. The jury leaned forward. Several of them looked uncomfortable. One woman in the front row had tears in her eyes. When Elena finished, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of the clerk's pen scratching across paper. Wexler cleared his throat. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore. No further questions." Crowley's attorney stood. His name was Harrison Kent, and everything about him screamed expensive. Tailored suit, polished shoes, the kind of confidence that came from never losing. He approached the witness stand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Whitmore," he said smoothly, "that was quite a story, very dramatic, very emotional. But I have to ask, is any of it actually true?" Elena felt ice in her veins. Every word. "Really?" "Because I have documents here that suggest a very different narrative." Kent held up papers. "This is a signed contract between your father and Mr. Crowley, perfectly legal, filed with the territorial court, and nowhere in this document does it mention coercion or threats. In fact, it appears to be a standard marriage arrangement of the type that's been common in this territory for decades. It's slavery dressed up in legal language. That's your opinion, but legally, there's nothing improper here." Kent walked closer. "Isn't it true, Miss Whitmore, that you ran away because you were attracted to Mr. Mercer? That this entire story is just a cover for an illicit relationship you didn't want your father to discover?" "No, that's a lie." "Is it?" "You spent the night alone with Mr. Mercer in the wilderness. You shared accommodations in Silver Creek. You've been living in protective custody together for weeks now." Kent's smile widened. "Seems like quite a romance built on the foundation of destroyed reputations and false accusations." Elena's hands were shaking. She gripped the edge of the witness stand to steady them. "Cole Mercer saved my life. Multiple times. There's nothing illicit about that." "Saved your life from what? From a legal marriage to a respected businessman? Or saved you from the consequences of your own poor choices?" Kent turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a young woman who made a deal she didn't like, found a man she preferred, and manufactured an elaborate story to justify abandoning her obligations. That's not a crime victim. That's a breach of contract." "You're twisting everything," Elena said. Her voice was rising despite her best efforts. "Crowley tried to own me. He killed people who got in his way. Allegedly, you keep saying these things, but where's the proof? Where are the bodies? Where's the evidence of these supposed crimes?" Kent walked back to the defense table and picked up another document. "I have here testimony from Sheriff Tully stating that there have been no unexplained deaths in Red Hollow during Mr. Crowley's residence there. No missing persons reports, no investigations into foul play." "Because Tully was on Crowley's payroll." Again, an allegation without proof. "You seem very comfortable making accusations, Miss Whitmore, less comfortable providing evidence." Wexler stood. "Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness." "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Kent, questions only." Kent nodded. "Of course, Your Honor." "Miss Whitmore, one final question. How much is the federal government paying you to testify against Mr. Crowley?" Elena blinked. "What?" "It's a simple question. The marshals have provided you protection, housing, food, transportation. That's quite an investment. What are you being paid in return?" "Nothing. I'm not being paid anything." You expect us to believe you're enduring all this out of pure civic duty? That there's no financial incentive whatsoever? I'm doing this because Crowley tried to destroy my life, and I want him to face consequences. That's the only incentive I need. Kent smiled like she'd just proven his point. A woman scorned. How original. No further questions. Elena left the witness stand feeling like she'd been beaten. The walk back to the witness room seemed endless. Every eye in the courtroom following her, judging her, deciding whether she was a victim or a liar or something in between. Cole was waiting in the hallway. He took one look at her face and said, "That bad." "Worse." Elena's voice cracked. "He made me sound like I was making everything up. Like I was just some girl chasing after you and using Crowley as an excuse. The jury's not stupid. They heard what you said before Kent got his turn. Did they, though? Or did Kent's version sound more believable?" Elena slumped against the wall. "Maybe Wexler was right. Maybe I should have been a robot. At least then Kent wouldn't have had all that emotion to use against me." "Stop!" Cole's voice was firm. "You told the truth. That's all anyone can ask. What Kent does with it is his problem, not yours." Barrett appeared from the courtroom, his expression grim. "Kent's calling character witnesses, people from Red Hollow who say Crowley was a model citizen, that the marriage contract was legitimate, that you had a reputation for being dramatic and unreliable." Elena felt sick. "Who?" "Shopkeepers he's helped financially, people who owe him money or favors, a teacher who says you were a difficult student." Barrett's jaw was tight. "It's all bought testimony, everyone knows it, but it still looks bad to a jury." "So I've lost." "We haven't lost yet. Wexler's got rebuttal witnesses, people Crowley hurt, evidence of corruption. It's not over." But Barrett's voice lacked conviction. The trial dragged on for 3 more days. Witness after witness took the stand, painting competing pictures of Victor Crowley. A monster, a philanthropist, a criminal, a victim of false accusations. The jury's faces grew more confused with each testimony, like they were trying to assemble a puzzle with pieces from different boxes. On the 4th day, Cole took the stand. Elena watched from the witness room through a crack in the door as he described what he'd seen in Red Hollow. The forced contract, the armed pursuit, the canyon fight. He was calm and factual, exactly the kind of witness Wexler wanted Elena to be. Kent tore into him anyway, questioned his past with the Pinkertons, suggested he was a violence-prone drifter looking for excitement, implied his relationship with Elena was something other than protective. "Isn't it true, Mr. Mercer, that you were fired from the Pinkertons for excessive use of force?" Kent asked. "I quit. I wasn't fired." "Semantics. The records show you were involved in an incident where a suspect died during interrogation." "The records show I was cleared of any wrongdoing in that incident." Cole's voice stayed level. "The man died of injuries sustained before I arrived. I tried to save him. Failed. That's what the official report says. Yet you quit immediately after. Interesting timing." "I quit because I was tired of working for an organization that valued results over methods." "That's not a crime." "No, but it does establish a pattern of violence in your history, a pattern that continued when you helped Miss Whitmore escape Red Hollow. How many men did you shoot in that canyon, Mr. Mercer?" "None fatally. I fired to disable and discourage, not to kill." "Very noble. And yet several of those men still bear scars from your shooting. One lost the use of his arm. Another walks with a permanent limp." Kent walked closer to the witness stand. "You're good at hurting people, aren't you? And when Elena Whitmore gave you an excuse to exercise that talent, you took it." Cole's expression finally shifted. Not to anger, to something colder. "I'm good at protecting people who need protecting. If that requires hurting people who are trying to harm them, then yes, I'll do it. And I won't apologize for it. Even if the people you're hurting were simply trying to enforce a legal contract. There's nothing legal about slavery. I don't care how many judges sign off on it." Kent smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. You've just admitted you don't respect the law when it doesn't align with your personal morality. No further questions." The prosecution rested the next day. The defense rested the day after. Closing arguments were scheduled for the following morning. That night, Elena sat in her room staring at nothing. She'd done everything she could, testified honestly, answered questions, endured Kent's attacks, and still it felt like they were losing, Like Crowley's money and connections were going to protect him one more time. A knock on her door. Barrett entered without waiting for permission. His face was strange. Not quite happy. Not quite sad. Something else. "We got him," he said. Elena stood. "What?" One of Crowley's men flipped, Pike. He's been in federal custody since the clearing, and today he agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Barrett's smile was grim. "He's giving us everything. Names, dates, details about the illegal land acquisitions, bribes paid to judges and sheriffs. And most importantly, he's confessing to the murder of Sarah Brennan, Crowley's second wife. Says Crowley ordered it personally." Elena's legs went weak. She sat back down hard. "When?" "Tomorrow morning, before closing arguments. The judge is allowing reopened testimony based on new evidence." Barrett looked at her seriously. "This changes everything. Pike's testimony corroborates yours, proves Crowley's pattern of violence and corruption. The jury won't be able to ignore it." "Why?" Elena asked. "Why would Pike turn on him? Because Pike's 50 years old and looking at life in prison. Because he's tired. Because he finally realized Crowley was never going to save him." Barrett shrugged. "Honestly, I don't care why. I just care that he's doing it." Cole appeared in the doorway. "You heard?" Elena nodded, still processing. "It's really over?" "Almost. Jury still has to convict, but with Pike's testimony, that's almost certain." Cole leaned against the doorframe. "You did it, Elena. You stood up to one of the most powerful men in the territory, and you won." "We won, all of us." Elena looked between them. "I couldn't have done this alone." "Nobody does anything important alone," Barrett said. "That's the point. One person standing up is brave. A community standing up is unstoppable." He headed for the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Pike's testimony the next morning was devastating. He sat in the witness stand, this man who'd hunted Elena through the mountains, and calmly described years of criminal activity orchestrated by Victor Crowley. Murder, intimidation, bribery, illegal seizure of property. He named names, provided dates. Detailed conversations where Crowley had explicitly ordered violence against anyone who opposed him. Kent tried to discredit him, suggesting he was lying for a plea deal, but Pike's answers were too detailed, too consistent. You could see it in the jury's faces. They believed him. When Pike described strangling Sarah Brennan in the woods outside Red Hollow and burying her body in an unmarked grave on Crowley's orders, 2 jurors looked away. One woman covered her mouth. Crowley sat perfectly still through all of it, his face a mask. But Elena could see the calculation in his eyes. He was already planning his next move, already thinking about appeals and legal maneuvers and how to survive this. Closing arguments were brief. Wexler summarized the evidence. Kent argued reasonable doubt. The judge gave instructions to the jury. They filed out to deliberate. And then there was nothing to do but wait. The wait lasted 6 hours. Elena spent it pacing the witness room, unable to sit, unable to think about anything except that jury room where 12 people were deciding whether justice actually meant something or if Crowley's money would protect him one more time. Cole brought her water she didn't drink and food she couldn't eat. Barrett checked in every hour with updates that amounted to nothing. The jury was still out. No one knew how long it would take. Verdicts were impossible to predict. As evening approached, Elena stood at the window, watching the sky turn orange and pink. Somewhere out there, her father was probably drinking himself unconscious. Somewhere, Chen's family was mourning. Somewhere, the people of Red Hollow were going about their lives, still living under the shadow of Crowley's empire, even though the man himself was on trial. "They're coming back," Barrett said from the doorway. Elena's heart stopped. "Already?" 6 hours is actually fairly long. Could mean they're being thorough, or it could mean they're deadlocked and arguing. He gestured toward the courtroom. Either way, we're about to find out. The courtroom was packed even tighter than before. Word had spread that a verdict was coming. Elena took her seat behind the prosecution table, Cole beside her, Barrett standing against the wall with his hand near his gun. The jury filed in. Elena tried to read their faces but couldn't. They looked tired, drained, like they'd been carrying something heavy and were relieved to set it down. The judge looked at the foreman, an older man with weathered hands. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of human trafficking, how do you find?" Guilty. Elena's breath caught. She heard someone gasp behind her, felt Cole's hand find hers under the table. On the charge of corruption of public officials? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Sarah Brennan? The foreman paused, looked at Crowley, looked back at the judge. Guilty. The courtroom erupted, people shouting, some celebrating, others protesting. The judge hammered his gavel, calling for order, threatening to clear the room. Elena sat frozen. It didn't feel real, couldn't be real. Men like Crowley didn't lose. They bought their way out, or intimidated their way out, or killed their way out. They didn't sit in courtrooms and hear the word guilty over and over like a death sentence. But there he was, Victor Crowley, the man who'd tried to own her, standing now, his face finally showing emotion, shock and rage and disbelief all at once. His lawyers were talking urgently, but he wasn't listening. He was looking at Elena, and for the first time since this started, she didn't look away. She held his gaze and let him see everything she felt. The fear he'd caused, the anger he'd earned, the satisfaction of watching his empire crumble. Then she smiled. Not a big smile, not triumphant, just a small, tired acknowledgement that she'd survived him, that she'd won. Crowley's face went white. He looked away first. The judge was sentencing him now. Life in federal prison for the murder charge, 20 years for trafficking, 10 years for corruption, all to be served consecutively. Crowley would die in prison. He'd never walk free again. Guards led him out in chains. As he passed Elena's seat, he stopped. The guards tried to pull him forward, but he planted his feet. "This isn't over," he said quietly, just to her. "I have friends, people who owe me. They'll make sure you pay for this." Cole started to stand, but Elena put a hand on his arm. She looked at Crowley and spoke just as quietly. "Then they'll have to find me first. And I'm done being easy to find." Crowley opened his mouth to respond, but the guards yanked him forward. He stumbled, caught himself, and was led out of the courtroom, still trying to look dignified in chains. The judge dismissed the jury with thanks and adjourned the court. People flooded forward, wanting to congratulate Elena, to shake her hand, to tell her she was brave. She endured it numbly, barely hearing their words, still processing that it was actually over. Barrett pulled her aside eventually. "Witness protection. We can arrange it if you want. New name, new town, complete fresh start." Elena thought about it. About disappearing, becoming someone else, living the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for one of Crowley's friends to make good on his threat. "No," she said. "I'm done hiding." "Elena, the threat's real. Just because Crowley's in prison doesn't mean—" "I know, but I spent my whole life being small and quiet and trying not to be noticed. It didn't protect me. It just made me easier to control." Elena looked at him steadily. "I'm not doing that anymore." Barrett studied her, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you take precautions, you stay alert, and if anything feels wrong, you contact me immediately." "I will." Cole walked her out of the courthouse into the evening air. The streets were still crowded, people milling around, discussing the verdict. Elena felt disconnected from all of it, like she was watching the world through glass. "You okay?" Cole asked. "I don't know. Ask me tomorrow, or next week, or next year." Elena took a deep breath. "What are you going to do now? Barrett's job offer still standing?" "Yeah, he wants me to start as a full deputy marshal. Says I've got a talent for the work. Do you want to?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Part of me does. Likes the idea of doing something that matters. But another part remembers my brother. Remembers what happened when he stood up to powerful men, and wonders if I'm just setting myself up for the same fate." "Your brother died because nobody helped him," Elena said. "You wouldn't be alone. You'd have Barrett, other marshals, a whole system backing you up." "Systems fail, people fail." "Yeah, but they also succeed sometimes." Elena looked at him. "You told me once that living with doing nothing was worse than dying trying to do something right. Did you mean it?" Cole smiled slightly. "Using my own words against me. That's not fair." "Life's not fair. We've established that pretty thoroughly." Elena felt something settling inside her, a decision she didn't know she'd been making. "I'm going back to Red Hollow." "What? No, that's—" where I'm from, where my mother's buried, where I have a right to exist without fear. Elena's voice was firm. Crowley's gone. His empire's collapsing. The people there need to know that change is possible, that standing up to corruption actually works sometimes, and I need to prove to myself that I can go home. It's not safe. Nowhere's safe, but Red Hollow is mine. I'm not giving it up just because Crowley tried to take it from me. Elena looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Besides, someone needs to rebuild what he destroyed. Might as well be me. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'll come with you. You don't have to. I know. But Barrett's offering me a deputy marshal position in any jurisdiction I want. Red Hollow's in that territory. Someone needs to make sure the new sheriff isn't corrupt. He met her eyes. And I'm not done watching your back yet. Elena felt her throat tighten. Thank you. For what? For being the person who helped when nobody else would. For teaching me I was stronger than I thought. For... She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Cole filled the silence. For being there when you needed someone to believe in you. I know. You did the same for me. They stood there in the cooling evening air, two people who'd survived impossible things together and were still trying to figure out what came next. So we go back, Elena said finally. We rebuild. We try to make Red Hollow into something better than what Crowley left behind. And if his friends come looking for revenge, then we deal with it, together. Elena felt something solid forming in her chest. Not confidence exactly, more like determination. I'm done being afraid, done letting fear make my decisions. Whatever comes next, I'm facing it on my feet. Cole nodded slowly. All right then. Let's go build something worth protecting. The journey back to Red Hollow took 4 days. Barrett provided an escort, 2 deputies who rode with them until they reached the town limits, then tipped their hats and headed back to the capital. Elena and Cole rode in alone, mid-morning, when most people would be going about their business. The town looked the same as when Elena had left. Same buildings, same dusty streets, same mountains in the background. But it felt different, smaller, less imposing, just a place, not a prison. People stopped and stared as they rode through. Elena recognized faces. Mrs. Chen at the general store. Patterson, the cobbler. The men who'd sat silent in the saloon while her father signed her away. They looked at her with expressions ranging from surprise to shame to resentment. Elena looked back without flinching. Let them see she wasn't afraid anymore. Let them wonder what she was going to do next. Her father's house sat exactly as she'd left it. Weeds growing in the yard, paint peeling, the porch sagging like it was tired of holding itself up. Elena dismounted and stood looking at it, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions she didn't have names for. You want me to come in with you? Cole asked. No, this is something I need to do alone. She found her father in the kitchen, sitting at the table with an empty bottle in front of him. He looked up when Elena entered, and his face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, relief, fear, shame. Elena, he whispered, you're alive. Did you think I wasn't? I didn't know. After you ran, after the marshals came through, after... He stopped, his voice breaking. I didn't know if I'd ever see you again. Elena sat down across from him, looked at this man who was supposed to protect her and had sold her instead. She wanted to hate him. Part of her did, but mostly she just felt tired. Crowley's in prison, she said. Life sentence. He's never getting out. John's eyes filled with tears. I heard. Whole town heard. People are saying... He shook his head. It doesn't matter what they're saying. What matters is you're safe. You're here. And I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry for what I did. For being too weak to protect you when you needed me. I know you are. Can you forgive me? Elena thought about that question. About forgiveness and what it meant. Whether it was something you gave because the other person deserved it, or because you needed to let go of the anger. I don't know yet, she said honestly. Maybe someday, but not today. Today I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward. What will you do? Stay. This is my home. Crowley doesn't get to take that from me. Elena stood. But I'm not living here anymore. I'm going to find my own place. Build my own life. You can be part of that if you can stay sober, If you can't, then I'll still be around town, but we won't be family. Not really. John nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair. He looked at her with something approaching pride. You've grown strong. Your mother would be proud. I hope so. Elena headed for the door, then paused. There's a meeting at the town hall tonight about electing a new mayor and sheriff now that Morrison and Tully are gone. You should come. People need to see that change is possible, even for people who made mistakes. She left before he could respond, walked out into the sunlight and found Cole waiting by the horses. How'd it go? He asked. About as well as it could. He's broken, maybe permanently, but that's not my problem to fix anymore. Elena looked around Red Hollow, seeing it with new eyes. This town's had too many broken people for too long. Time to change that. The meeting that night packed the town hall beyond capacity. People stood in the aisles and spilled out onto the street. Elena stood at the front with Cole and Barrett, who'd ridden down from the capital specifically for this. Barrett addressed the crowd. Victor Crowley's criminal empire has been dismantled. The officials he corrupted are either in prison or awaiting trial. That leaves a vacuum, and vacuums get filled by whoever's strongest or whoever acts first. So you have a choice. Fill it with more corruption and let someone else become the next Crowley. Or fill it with people who actually care about this community. A man Elena didn't recognize stood up. Easy to say, but Crowley provided stability, provided jobs. Who's going to do that now? Legitimate businesses will, Elena said. Heads turned toward her. Crowley's stability came at the cost of your freedom. He controlled everything and everyone. Real stability comes from people working together, not one man controlling the supply of everything. You're just a girl, someone called out. Yeah? What do you know about running a town? I know what it feels like to be owned. I know what it costs when good people do nothing. And I know that this town deserves better than what it's had. Elena's voice was steady. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm saying we should figure it out together instead of waiting for another tyrant to tell us what to do. Mrs. Chen stood up. Miss Whitmore's right. We've been afraid for too long. My family lost our bank to Crowley. Others lost their land, their businesses, their dignity. Time we took it back. Others started standing, speaking up, sharing stories about what Crowley had taken from them. The meeting transformed from a political gathering into something more like a reckoning. People finally saying out loud what they'd been thinking in silence for years. By the end of the night, they'd elected new leadership. A rancher named Thomas Kemp for mayor, a man Crowley had never been able to corrupt despite trying. A former army captain named Sarah Billings for sheriff, the first woman to hold the position in the territory. And a citizens' council that included Mrs. Chen, Patterson the cobbler, and eventually John Whitmore, who'd shown up halfway through and sat in the back looking like he wanted to disappear. As people filed out, Barrett pulled Elena aside. You did good tonight. Gave people hope. That matters. Will it be enough, though? Hope doesn't rebuild businesses or restore stolen property? No. But it's the foundation everything else gets built on. Without hope, people don't try. Don't fight. Don't believe change is possible. Barrett smiled. You proved change is possible. Now comes the hard part, actually building something better. Over the following months, Red Hollow transformed slowly and imperfectly. The Chen family reclaimed their bank with assistance from territorial funds earmarked for restitution. Businesses that had operated under Crowley's thumb started functioning independently. Property seized through corruption was returned to rightful owners or sold to pay damages. It wasn't smooth. There were fights about who deserved what, arguments about how to divide resources. People who'd benefited from Crowley's system resented losing their advantages. But gradually, painfully, the town started functioning like a community instead of a dictatorship. Elena bought a small house on the edge of town with money she'd earned working as a clerk for the new sheriff's office. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms and a porch. But it was hers, bought with her own money, answering to nobody. Cole took a permanent position as deputy marshal, working with Sheriff Billings to establish actual law enforcement instead of Crowley's version of protection rackets disguised as security. He moved into rooms above the stable near Elena's house, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to give her space. They settled into a routine that was comfortable and undefined, working together, eating meals at the boarding house, walking through town in the evenings while Elena told Cole stories about growing up there, and Cole described his cases. People asked if they were courting. Elena never knew how to answer. What they had was deeper than romance and more complicated than friendship. They were survivors bound by shared trauma and mutual respect. Whether that would evolve into something else, neither seemed in a hurry to decide. One evening, 6 months after the trial, Elena stood on her porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Cole appeared walking up the road, still wearing his deputy marshal badge. "Long day?" she asked. "Caught 3 men trying to set up a gambling operation in the back of Harper's saloon. Turns out they were connected to some of Crowley's old associates, still trying to reclaim territory." Cole sat on the porch steps. "They're in jail now, but it made me think." About? About how this never really ends. There'll always be someone trying to take advantage. Always be corruption trying to creep back in. We might have beaten Crowley, but we didn't beat the fundamental problem. Elena sat beside him. "So what do we do?" "We keep fighting, keep pushing back. Hope that every time we do, it gets a little easier for the next person to stand up." Cole looked at her. "You ever regret it? Everything that happened? The running and the fighting and the trial?" Elena thought about the question seriously. About the girl she'd been 6 months ago, terrified and trapped, believing she had no choices. About the woman she'd become, scarred and stronger, and still figuring out who she wanted to be. "No," she said. "It was hard. It was terrifying. People died. But I'd rather have fought and survived than surrendered and died inside." She paused. "You?" "Same. My brother stood up to a corrupt man and died for it. I ran away and spent 6 years hating myself. At least now when I look in the mirror, I see someone trying to be better instead of someone failing to forget." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from orange to purple to black. Stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had watched them flee through the wilderness, fight in canyons, testify in courtrooms. "Cole?" Elena said eventually. "Thank you for everything. For being the person who saw me as more than a victim. For believing I could survive when I didn't believe it myself. You would have survived without me. Maybe differently, but you would have found a way. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out." Elena stood and stretched. "You want to come in? I made stew. It's probably terrible, but it's food." Cole smiled. "Sounds perfect." They went inside, and through the window, the lights of Red Hollow glowed warm against the darkness. A town still healing, still fighting, still trying to be better than its worst instincts. Not perfect, not fixed, but alive with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, good people fighting back could actually change things. Years later, when people asked Elena about those days, she'd struggle to find words that captured it. The fear and the violence and the desperate scramble for survival. But also the strength she'd discovered, the community that had reformed itself, the way trauma could be transformed into purpose if you refused to let it define you. She'd tell them about Cole, who became one of the territory's most respected marshals. About Barrett, who eventually became territorial chief and used his position to root out corruption wherever he found it. About her father, who managed 2 years of sobriety before the bottle claimed him, but who'd used those 2 years to help others struggling with the same demons. She'd tell them about the ranch she and Cole eventually built together, Liberty Ridge, they called it, half joke and half prayer. A place where people running from impossible situations could find shelter and support and the time to figure out who they wanted to become. Most of all, she'd tell them that the hardest thing she ever did wasn't surviving Crowley. It was choosing to stay in Red Hollow afterward, choosing to face the place that had failed her and try to make it better instead of running towards somewhere easier. Because running was temporary relief. Building something was permanent change, and Elena had spent enough of her life running. On quiet evenings, sitting on the porch of Liberty Ridge with Cole beside her and the frontier stretching endless ahead, Elena would think about the contract her father had signed. The piece of paper that had tried to reduce her entire existence to terms and conditions. Cole had torn it up in his forge that first night, burned it to ash. But Elena had kept a small fragment she'd found later, scorched around the edges, but with part of her name still visible. She kept it in a frame on her wall, not as a reminder of what had almost happened, as proof that contracts written by powerful men weren't destiny, that pieces of paper couldn't contain a human life, no matter how many judges signed them, That sometimes when the world tried to tell you who you had to be, the bravest thing you could do was refuse and build yourself into something better instead. The frontier had been built by people running from something: poverty, persecution, pasts they wanted to forget. But the best parts of it were built by people running toward something, toward possibility, toward freedom, toward the stubborn belief that you could shape your own life if you fought hard enough for the right to try. Elena had learned that lesson the hard way, had paid for it in fear and blood and nights spent wondering if she'd see morning, but she'd learned it. And now, watching the sun set over land that belonged to nobody and everybody, she finally understood what freedom actually meant. Not the absence of fear, not the guarantee of safety, not even the promise that good would always triumph over evil. Freedom was the right to choose, to fight, to fail and try again, to build something worth protecting and defend it with everything you had. It was the space between who you were and who you could become, and in that space, anything was possible, even hope, even justice. Even a girl from Red Hollow who'd been sold like property, becoming a woman who helped rebuild a town and proved that sometimes the people who survive impossible things are the ones strong enough to ensure nobody else has to. The stars came out one by one, same as always, eternal and indifferent and beautiful. And beneath them, Elena Whitmore smiled, because she'd earned the right to, and nobody could ever take that away.